What?
I know.
What?
We got someone on the phone too. Call this very formal work session to order. Carrie, will you please call the roll?
Counselor Pietzold.
Here, and glad we have air conditioning.
This week.
Counselor Smallwood.
Here.
Counselor Hamlin is an excused absence.
Yeah, an excuse now.
Counselor Lee. Here. Counselor Exner.
Here, and I also
Counselor
said-
Schultz. Here. Mayor Pulliam.
Here. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us on this beautiful day. On our agenda tonight, we're going to get an update on our transit master plan. We're going to get a presentation on the master fee schedule update. And then we're going to be providing staff with direction on the amount and the implementation of the public safety fee we've been discussing the last several months. With that, Jordan, am I going to you, or are we gonna pause
so I
for
think
you
we're
to
waiting
share?
for the consultant to arrive for the transit master plan. Maybe if you're okay with it, moving up to the master fee
Yeah.
schedule update.
Let's do it.
Let's just like count out the all of it.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
Public safety fee too. Let's
Okay.
do that. Remember, there's air conditioning here. You don't have it at home. I have it at home, but I can move it as well.
Yeah, for once, it's not too cold.
I know, right?
Yeah, no problem. I'll just introduce this as, one thing that we'd like to do on an ongoing basis from here on is, taking the fees and charges that the city currently has within our master schedule, so planning, building, parks and recreation, utilities, all those, and do it just on an annual basis instead of taking fees to the council in piecemeal or, haphazardly as things come up, that we have a more, predictable and regular schedule for bringing you fee adjustments. And a lot of the fees that we do adjust are based off of the consumer price index or a construction cost index, and what we would do is do that annually, either in line with the budget process where the new budget fiscal year goes into place and the new rate goes into place July 1. This cycle, we do have some special circumstances. We're going through that rate study with FCS group for our water and wastewater utilities, and so that will be coming forward to the council in a future date this summer. But right now, given about the timing of the budget and trying to move in a direction of having the fees and charges being looked at least on an annual basis, we saw this as an opportunity to bring these adjustments to you right now before the new fiscal year.
All right.
Who's our finance director?
So, in an effort to not overwhelm you with the full 14-page document that included items that weren't changing as well as those that were changing, I just did kind of a snapshot of all the categories that you have for the proposed change. Does everyone have an agenda packet?
So, I've got it on my computer.
Okay. So just right off the bat, the administrative fees, or miscellaneous charges rather, in item 1, the only thing that we're proposing to change on here is the records request fee. Council, those that were on council last year may recall that this was kind of a relatively new fee added to the fee schedule. Not that we didn't occasionally charge previously, but there wasn't a standard flat rate. It kind of was left to different departments to decide how that was managed. Prior administration opted to just have 2 fee categories. One was the administrative fee, which is essentially sort of those mid-level staff that can handle the day-to-day public records requests. So, it was just a copy of a contract or meeting minutes or anything like that that's not readily available online. We would be charging $36 currently, and we're proposing just to bump that up to $39, which is the average cost of the 5 employees in the city that would handle this type of fee with the new salary schedule that we'll have effective July 1st. So just helping to recover our costs associated with that.
Jen, did you have a question?
Oh, I just wondered if you get very many public information requests.
We don't get a lot. They do come in. Carrie's probably a better person to answer that since she tracks all of them for us.
Most of them that come in are building and planning, so a lot of them are on that side, wanting information on developments or whatnot. So we get a handful probably, a month that'll come in. Sometimes we don't get any in a month, but there's a fair amount.
Thank
And
you.
our internal policy, for the most part, is if it's something that we can just run a quick report on, it takes, 10 or 15 minutes, we don't charge. We reserve that fee for the large records requests that are gonna take 4, 5, 6 hours, that we're gonna dedicate a body to go and really take on this project, so, it's rare that we have those really large records requests.
Sure.
Do we quote out how many hours we think that will be prior to them?
Yeah, so they submit a formal document to us, and then we respond within, was it 5 business days, Carrie?
Yeah.
Start
to it.
throwing you on the spot now.
Mhm.
Within 5 days, letting them know that either yes, we have the records and they're readily available, or yes, we have them, but it takes time to research them, or no, we don't have them, and kind of give them a rough cost estimate. Depending on the total amount of the records request, we will require a deposit in some cases as well, just to make sure we're not doing a bunch of work and then they opt to say, no, we don't want it, we've spent a lot of staff time working on it, we have recruiting costs, so.
And that includes email requests and things like that.
And the executive fee, same, excuse me, same methodology as we just went over, but this is the average cost of a department head. And those are not hourly rates, that's salary and benefit costs, so we're not making that much per hour for the record. That includes all the overhead associated with that. And those would be more high level requests, or, something that a general staff member doesn't either have the access to those records, or it's just not feasible for a general staff member to do it. Any other questions on records requests? Hearing none, I will move on. Planning charges, so this is a very long section of the summary. Goes on all the way to the 3rd page. And previously, council had, when we did the last update to the planning fees, council had also agreed to just increasing those based on CPI moving forward. And so that's all that this section is being updated by. The old method, or the old measurement of CPI, which was kind of the Portland area, is no longer a unit of measure. And so we have moved to the West Coast class size BC. It's kind of the same unit of measure that a lot of our comparator cities and a lot of other jurisdictions in Portland are using, or in Oregon are using right now. And for the 12-month period ending in April, the CPI was 2.7%, so all those planning fees have just been increased by 2.7%. There was not any fancy methodology behind that other than just bumping it up.
I appreciate the small increments. I know in the past, some of the increments were really very large, enormously large, and it was very hard to bite off. And I look at all these, and it's not, it's manageable, and this is where we wanted to get to back in the day, was these small increments versus the massive amounts, even for planning where a development's coming in, that you changed it by $2,000 for a permit fee or something.
Yeah, these ones are
These are-
almost unnoticeable at that small
I
rate.
appreciate it.
All right, moving on. Oh,
And the expectation is you'll do this annually, is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, that's the process that we would like to get in the routine of.
I think that's also what is, Jeremy was thinking of too. In the old days, more often, smaller, is a whole lot better than a long period of time, big.
So that's not to say that there won't be some larger increases, because there's still, like the building department, for example, they haven't updated their fees for quite a while. So my understanding is that they're working on reaching out to some of our comparator agencies, getting ideas of what their fees look like, how they increase theirs, and I would not be surprised if that was brought before you sometime within the next year, but that's another project with the building department's working on currently. I think it's been since 2011, I want to say. Kelly can confirm that next week, but it's been a number of years since those ones have been even looked at or researched. So. And then moving on to public works charges, only 3 things for that category. So the first one is a public improvement plan review and inspection fees. And Mike provided me some information, so I will do my best to answer any questions that come up from that. But the old sort of structure was really only three categories. It was, 0 to 50,000 was 3%, 50,000 to 500,000 was, or I'm sorry, 50,000 to 100,000 was 2.5%, and 100,000 and up was 2%. And so Mike has proposed a new fee schedule to reduce the range between steps, to eliminate any incentive, to increase the valuation to just above the next step, to reduce the overall fee that you're paying. So it's kind of broken out and staggered a little more evenly, with the goal being to no longer lose money on small projects and overcharge on larger projects, but to kind of maintain a consistent and equitable charge for these types of fees.
So if you're a small project, you're gonna be paying quite a bit if I'm doing my math right.
Small projects are gonna see a larger increase, or a larger
Percentage.
increase than a larger project under this new proposed method.
So can you give me an idea what that jump would be for a 10,000, let's say a $9,000 category? Would that,
If it's $9,000, you're gonna spend, what, $930 plus the $150 initial fee, so a little over $1,000 for that project.
For a
It was-
$10,000 project.
and it was a 3%, which is a quarter of that fee, so is that what it used to be, is that way?
Yeah, so it used to be 3%, or currently is 3%.
Can I have an example of what a small project like that would be? I mean, that's a pretty big number of the overall cost of a project, just for this one permit fee.
A big lump jump too.
I'm sure there's other fees that they're paying for the development that is not
Yeah.
seen in this, but then you end up taxing over,
Curb cuts or something.
over this ends up being more than the entire project itself.
I think what we're trying to do is, even small projects, if it's home improvement related, right? And it's, dealing with utilities and the right of way, that still takes a lot of engineering time to review, trying to, recover our costs for that review.
I think that's the big thing.
But what are the examples of?
I don't have an example readily available, but I can do some digging during the transit presentation and come back.
Great.
Give you a little bit more information on that one. So we'll table that one for a moment. System development charges for water, not significant, excuse me, changes on this one. It's moving towards a per EDU charge or equivalent dwelling unit. So the most basic example for a single family home on a 5/8 by 3/4 inch meter, just over $3,000, going up to $3,400. And then all the other charges, beyond that with the larger meter sizes are there's a formula that Mike has to determine those charges. He's also proposing removing the 8-inch meter fee from the fee schedule, and then just calculating at the time of the development any meters that are greater than 6 inches. It's my understanding is those are very few and far between. It's rare that we have anything over 6 inches. It would be a real one-off if that were to come before this department. But it would be based on the same methodology that's built into how these charges were developed. And again, I think, to your point, Councilor Fietzel, the intent behind this is to have kind of smaller manageable increases as we go along. These are based on the Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index, which seems to be, or from my understanding, is a unit of measure that Public Works has used for quite a while on their SDC increases. That increase as of May, using the most recent data available, was 4.6, so it's a little bit higher than the typical CPI, but I'm not really surprised when all the construction costs are pretty high right now. So I think that's not a surprise to see that a little bit higher than CPI.
ODOT's been telling us
So you're not totally shocked by that number then.
I don't know if I believe that one, but.
And then the second piece of the system development charges is our transportation SDC, and this would be moving up to $241.31 per adjusted average daily person trip. And again, that is based on the same unit measure as the water SDC, so that engineering use record construction cost index for Seattle, so the same 4.61 or 4.6%.
I'm really having a hard time figuring out what that means to me. The jump from 214 to 241, like talking Fred Meyer's kind of a trip count, or are we talking, or anything from 0 to 5,000 people a day? Is that what we're talking about there?
You know, I am not an SDC expert. Jordan, do you have any feedback on this one?
It's probably based on the trip generation manual, or the type of use, and looking at trips that are generated by that use, and there's adjusted daily person trip based on that use. So if you're a coffee shop, you generate so many trips, and then you're gonna pay, $241, per that daily person trip. That is based on the Bible, for lack of a better word, of the trip generation manual, which most agencies use to, basically determine what.
Gone through those before.
Yeah.
Very uninteresting.
Well, that's why you see places like a drive-through coffee shop having such higher transportation SDCs than a pet store, for lack of a better example.
And people on Facebook don't understand that, hey, the fees for the coffee shop are so much higher, but they have a lot more
Right.
trip generation. It was, if you remember, Carl, on planning commission, we talk all the time about trip calculations for businesses coming in and
I remember it being very uninteresting.
Oh, I found it very interesting. There's a difference, but, yeah.
Think of how many vehicles are gonna be on the road, now to go to that business and, go on that street, to go through that drive-through, just for
That's
example,
assuming
cost.
assuming that's their destination, right? Maybe you're traveling to work and you happen to stop along the way to get coffee.
It affects the intersection, it affects the intersections downstream, right? And that's where, like, Fred Meyer's area, there's a certain trip calculation that's allowed for the
Right,
developments
yeah.
in there, is because that intersection has only so much capacity. And we do have certain intersections that are way over capacity, as we well know. So those are to help make those larger and spread those out.
To the mayor's point, it's also, SDCs are to recognize that a certain amount of investment has gone into the cities and, infrastructure, roads, water and all that. And now this business is benefiting from that infrastructure being built, so they're paying to basically reimburse the city for us already constructing that they can now use, so people can go to their business. And then we take that money and build 362nd and other great projects.
Are we? What are we working on?
Getting closer every day.
All right.
I'm sure you are.
And so the next category of rate changes would be in the water section. These two are new rates, new fees. The first is a meter used from a fire hydrant. So, hey, there's the expert.
That signal went up.
Right away.
Sandy's great, you're not very far away.
Do you want to jump back and have Mike answer your public improvement plan review and inspection?
No, let's just put them right on the spot.
Yeah, why not?
I
I got put right on
like
the
your
spot,
style.
so.
I like your style.
Yeah, this is for, like if the developer comes in and they have a half-street improvement or an entire 50-lot subdivision. We do an internal plan review, and then we send it out to Kern McLeod, our consulting engineers, for plan review too. So we're paying for their time as well as staff time. And then it also covers inspections on the site while the improvements are being built. So a larger project, takes more time, but usually they're a little more sophisticated designers that put those plans together, so the plan review goes a little more quickly. A smaller project, sometimes you don't get the most skilled designers in there, and so you might have 4 or 5 back and forth on a set of plans, change this, send it out, comes back, change this, and this. And so we find on the smaller projects, we end up spending a lot more consulting fees and staff time on those than we do on the larger projects. So the larger projects were basically subsidizing the cost of the smaller projects. So we try to put more steps in the range there to cover, because the existing schedule we had really wide steps, and and those are pretty old, as I've been changed in a long time. And it used to be, when those fees were developed, a $100,000 project or a $200,000 project was a big deal. You might be able to build a 40-lot subdivision for $250,000 in improvement costs. Now it's closer to like $2.5 million. So it just was kind of antiquated.
Is there something philosophically wrong about the larger projects subsidizing the smaller projects?
If you are the developer of the larger project, I think you would have a philosophical issue with that.
Because my worry, just to my point, is sometimes I worry with these SDCs, we start to price out the local entrepreneur for the larger, one that can actually come in and afford to do these things.
Yeah, I mean, anybody that can put together a $2.5–3 million project, maybe some of them are worthwhile, I don't know, I mean, it goes the same, we work with big home builders like Lennar and Holt and those people that are nationwide, and then we work with just the guy who does a 12-lot subdivision every 3 years,
Yeah.
So can I go, I want to ask Tyler the question he didn't know, but what it would be a project? Can you give an example of a project that would be the one penny to $10,000 range that had the increase from up to 12%?
Well, like a half-street improvement on a single lot. Would probably, that might be a little more than $10,000, but that's a good example. Or like a stormwater detention basin in an apartment complex, something like that.
Okay, because I guess my concern was that the 12% of, $10,000, $9,000 is a pretty big portion of the whole project. I mean, at 12% of the whole project there, talking, let's say $1,000, $900, or more, with 150, and your whole budget, you're only doing a $10,000 project, and then you have other fees or other things that you've got to do, and we end up getting to where the tax or the SDCs, those things end up being a very large portion of the whole project, and it can be kind of felt like it's really hard to bite off as someone who's built 2 houses as myself, not as a normal developer or anything. I just want to build my house, and you're just kind of being taxed out of being able to do that.
Yeah, but these aren't systems development charges, nor are they taxes. We provide a service.
Well, it's a service, I understand, but everyone believes it's a tax. I did when I had to get my permit. That was a tax to me. Regardless if it's a permit or not, it's still
Probably costs more.
it's something I had to give out that I didn't get anything but the ability to build, right?
Well, I mean, those are building fees and systems development charges. If you build a house on a lot in a subdivision, you don't pay these fees. The pipe's already in, the road's already in, the curb's already in. So these fees are like, an unimproved
Right.
street frontage or an unimproved site, no curbs.
Right, if I had to build that half street in front of that place I was building, I'd have to pay that. So that's where I just kind of was like, it's such a small $10,000 mark at such a high percentage of that overall cost was one that I have a little hard time biting off, because it's like, it's
I agree.
$1,000 basically. We'll just round up a little bit, but for the $10,000 project. So, and I don't know how many $10,000 projects we're going to have, because asphalt and curbs and all that stuff costs probably more than $10,000. My driveway in concrete 11 years ago was about $15,000, right?
Yeah.
Just in the concrete. So.
Right. Yeah, but I think it's just there's the consultant's time, and so they're billing out at about $130 an hour,
Yeah.
$150 an hour. And then, staff time, a lot of times you're working with builders who may not be as experienced or skilled, and so, they require a lot of hand-holding, this is the 3rd time I've looked at this curb form, you still have to change this, and so sometimes the smaller builders tend to get more time, and that's what we've been doing. We've been spending more time with them, losing money on, what we've been paying for minor units.
guess I look at it as that it's a bonus for being in Sandy.
Yeah.
There are, that's right, though, we don't get many $10,000 or less projects.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of, we were talking of a project that I'm about to jump into where off of Junker Street, there's no sidewalks and there's, some places there's no pavement at all. And you got two small lots that a client of mine is gonna end up having to do any kind of work that gets, for those properties, is gonna have to have full street improvement. They're looking at something on the order of $75,000 just for the materials and doing the work. And that project will come on
6%.
6%, okay, so 6% of $60,000, $50,000 is
Be about $4,000.
$4,000 or so.
That,
And one owner is doing that, putting that money out.
More reasonable.
that one there, I think, is a little bit more reasonable for me in the overall of the percentage of than the 10,000, you know. The 10,000 is more of a homeowner ability to do something
I'm trying to think of.
versus some of the bigger projects, but that's my personal.
And we can change the floor, we can come back on the 17th and, change the floor. So then, it starts at 50, or we could stick another, stick another range in there between 10 and 50, or maybe make it 20 to 50 or something, have a flat fee for 20 and less. But, we really don't have a lot of, probably a lot of $10,000 list. We just aren't that many.
So maybe it is a 20,000 flat.
Piece of concrete sidewalk in front of the house or something, or?
No, because the grade and the elevation would have already been established. It doesn't take any engineering. You just match the curb elevation with your sidewalk. This is like on a vacant lot with no street frontage. Somebody has to go out there and survey that and establish the elevation of the curb, and, make sure that it drains and there's a crown, and, the water doesn't run off on somebody else's property, and, so it's, I mean, engineers will tell you this too, when they don't like doing these $10,000 projects because, they'll go to the developer and say, okay, it's gonna cost me, $4,400 to design your $10,000 project. And so that's crazy, but, there's still amount of survey and design work involved. The smaller projects is a lot.
Well, so then it makes it sound like in that aspect of it for infill build, because I know like cities want to do infill, it doesn't sound like those are cost effective to be able to do infill. So if we had a project in the city to be able to help with the infill on those projects versus trying to SDC with heavier fees, that could then help fill some of those infill vacant lots, because we cut, not that we have a lot, but I know we do have some, because we have some roads and things that are still gravel out there, which you maybe, and then we're getting pretty off topic, but that's kind of like, where can we help out those, so they don't stay vacant lots for the next 100 years?
We do have some of those. I'm thinking of Sandy Heights. There's a lot of distance there without any sidewalks at all.
Olson.
Olson's another one, right? And then there's some empty lots in there, or some houses that are gonna be knocked down.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. On to water rates. So currently we don't charge anything for metered use from a fire hydrant other than just the charge for the water that's consumed. Administratively, there's some costs with checking the meter out, checking the meter in, scheduling Public Works to go out there to place the meter.
So we're not like the city of Portland.
We are not like the city of Portland. And I think Mike can probably add some more information to this too, but I know from just the utility billing standpoint, with my clerk, there's, administrative time that we don't recoup any costs for. And there's also no incentive or disincentive rather currently, for someone that has a hydrant meter to return in a timely manner. So this kind of staggered rental of $2 per day for the first 30 days and then $5 per day beyond that 31st day will hopefully incentivize developers or anyone that's using a hydrant meter to get their project done and return the meter back to Public Works so that we can either check that out to someone else or there's not just a meter that's floating around town attached to a hydrant somewhere.
So in a development, you see it all the time where they hooked up, you know, because maybe they need water to do their thing or whatever. But these developments go on for more than 30 days. You know, bigger developments, we see them in Bluff and over here in Bornstead. Do they need to bring that meter in and then repay the fee again to take it back out again? Or is it just coming in to get it read and then they can go back out? Or do you go out and read the
We
meters?
just read it, for most of them, you know, we want to just read it once a month, get on the regular billing cycle. Like Tyler pointed out, these are off the regular billing cycle.
Right.
It's not like they get a file from the meter reader like
Sure.
for all the other meters. So somebody has to go out there, read it, bring the thing into Jamie, she reconciles it with the, you know, the rate schedule. Well, usually, the deposit, we usually just charge against the deposit, so we don't necessarily have to send a bill. But,
These projects go on for more than 31 days, so
right,
how do
but
you?
we're trying to avoid the thing where the person, the builder might have meter for 3 months, especially this time of year.
Yeah.
We only have about 4 of these things, and we have 9 people asking for one. And so, you know, and the things cost about $3,000 each, so we don't wanna buy a fleet of these things for a very short spike in demand that's very seasonal. So we want these, they're like parking spaces, you want them to turn over rapidly. You don't want somebody using 700 gallons of water, we bill them like $6 for the water, but he has the thing sitting out there for 90 days, and everybody else who needs to use, you know, 90,000 gallons of water can't get a meter. So that's what we're trying to rectify, is keep them turning over so nobody just sits on the thing.
Say we have 6 of them,
We have 4 of them.
4 of them.
Hey, George, are you right there?
Are these
Yeah.
the same 4 that we've had
Hey,
for?
we're getting a call, so I'm just gonna leave my phone on and I'll let you know when I'm back.
All right, thanks,
Okay.
Laurie.
Is this the same 4 that we've had for 20 years, or?
No, we
Just-
bought a couple more, like, a couple of years ago, you know, when things pick up. And sometimes they get stolen, you know, and so, you know, they cut the lock and, you know, should we charge the builder for that, or is that just the cost of doing it? Now, and developers also have the ability, or contractors also have the ability to furnish, and many of them do, many larger contractors have their own meter.
Oh, they can do
So-
that?
Yeah, so they don't
Oh,
have
yeah.
to pay, you know, they look at it from the economic standpoint, like, well, gee, I can buy one of these meters for $3,000, and I don't have to pay the $5, you know, a day rental fee, I can keep it as long as I want.
Okay, I didn't
So
realize that they could do
it
that.
incentivizes, you know, like Tyler was saying, the developer to furnish their own.
Okay, I didn't
device.
realize they could buy their own, or how do we read those meters that they buy themselves?
The same way we read the other ones, we just send some of the other to the other.
Okay.
So, we won't charge any of the firefighters or training they do?
No, this is just for construction.
They do it monthly, they might catch volume of water, I suppose, but you're not charging them anything.
No, it's in the code, there's no charge for fire protection.
That's insult to injury if you have a house
Yeah.
that's on fire, and
Yeah.
charge for fire, and you never talk to them.
You didn't pay your bill, we can't.
Moody shows up and.
Okay.
I got the key.
The
law
law
guys,
guys,
So this deposit gets returned if they return the things?
correct, and then whatever charges they've accrued against the deposit. Usually they just give us a Visa number, we put a charge on it, and then we cut them a check, which is another administrative hassle to give them the balance back. And we'll spend $10 getting somebody a check for $6, which is their balance after their deposit.
That's not uncommon.
All right, Tyler.
So the final 2 charges, fire hydrant flow test, so we currently don't charge any fee for this service. The proposed fees on here would essentially just allow the city to recover the operating costs of providing the flow test. Any?
So this is like when
information you wanna
somebody's
have, Mike?
designing a building and they wanna know how much, what the fire flow is on the pipes out in front of the building so they can size their sprinkler system. We used to provide this information, we used to keep track of it. Fire district used to go and do this work too, but there's a lot of liability associated with providing that kind of information. So very, very few agencies do that anymore. You know, we want the onus on the designer, you know, not, well, the city told me it was, you know, 6,000 gallons a minute, and it turned out to be 3,500, my building burned down. So we just want to avoid that risk. And And then, there's two, they just let the water flow out of the meter and they, determine what the fire flow is, they put a little gauge of these. And so, we can't put chlorinated water into the storm drains, so, we have to go out there with a bucket of this stuff, this dechlor stuff, and neutralize the chlorine, or they can provide it, and that's very expensive, so, that's another subsidy that we've been providing. We've been fronting the cost of that.
All right, Sandy Net.
And last but not least is Sandy Net. So currently the 300 megabit fiber service is $39.95 per month for residential and business. In the long range financial plan for Sandy Net, as well as in the upcoming biennium, there's been a proposed rate increase of $2 per month, bringing that up to $41.95.
Two questions here. Jeremy, you may answer. One is, what's our competitors at? And then two is on business. Is that, what if you're a business that has multiple users, using the internet? I mean, it's just a flat fee, no matter how many.
Yeah, I can answer.
Yeah.
That, so the competitor part of it, we actually looked at as a board with Joe over the course since we started the fiber of increasing that a couple times, and both times came back after with going to bring forward to recommend increasing it during the set schedule increase that we talked about in building it out. There was the time is looking at it, he had determined that the chances of people going away from the service would be more of a hindrance than actually raising it up. You may have more people going off the service, you raised it up a few dollars, and then you're actually bringing less revenue than you were going to make, right? It's a competitive market, unlike sewer is, you don't have competition in the sewer part, right? Or the water part, right? And so, so there is a competitive market that you've got to be aware of that, and people are quite sensitive on that. So that's kind of where that.
But like, is Wave at like $60 a month?
So when you look at
Comcast
just.
charges $59.
Comcast charges
59.
So what we've
200.
what we've seen is the price of internet has been coming down as the megabits go up out there in other areas. We don't have Comcast here, we have Wave.
No, not here.
But that same market, CenturyLink and Frontier with the fiber and other companies like that. So it's not an easy, we can just do it like other city utilities, and we've really struggled out with the board over the years of how to do that and make sure that one, we're representing our citizens in a livability aspect of it, and then two, in the being able to keep customers and not have that attrition from just diving to the next cheapest thing out there, that type of thing, or ticking someone off. There's a point when fiber gets put in that was discovered that it takes so long before that's paid off, and so if you raised it and yet you didn't recoup your costs before they canceled, then you're not recouping your costs on the next 18 months of it needed to have it. So you're better off with still what we cost of getting it there than to have no money whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of factors that went into that formula that he was teetering back and forth years ago and came back and said, we were ready to raise it. He's like, I don't want to do it after really diving into all the models that he was generating. It's pretty impressive of what brought that data in. On the business side of it, what was discussed there with the board, and as we know as engineers, and Greg can share too, was that the business side of things takes less bandwidth than homes. And so it's an interesting dynamic because businesses are business, they have more money. We looked at it as we have a lot of other types of businesses that don't, we have a lot of people just swiping credit cards, and that was a big thing. And so when we went to offering $19.95 a month for wireless, and then going, hey, you pay $39.95 for business because you're a coffee shop swiping cards, I mean, that's a huge increase for swiping it, right? But we needed to have that $39.95 a month as a base limit to pay our bills. So we looked at it as an engineer background, is what saying that businesses technically use a lot less bandwidth than home users. And so that's just more kind of gravy. Now, there's the other side of it where you have dedicated and enterprise services that are part of this, but, yeah, your typical home user watching Netflix on 4 machines at once is gonna use a lot more bandwidth. So the cost to deliver it, now the cost where is the installation that costs more in business, right? Because it's a lot of hard surface where you have to bore and dig up and those type of things. But that's in the installation gets recovered in that. So what we did there is we suggested that business be the exact same as home. It's been great marketing, not here, but also all over the US and other cities. When I was back going, when I got invited to the White House, we met earlier with some other municipalities, one back in North Carolina goes, you know what, we saw what you did and we wish we would have done the same thing. We can't back out of it now because once we've changed that model, had that model be higher, but we would love because we know that it doesn't cost us any more and we could have attracted so many more businesses. So that's kind of the, well, you, to answer your question, sorry, it's a little long-winded, but that's some history there.
It's also a harder question to answer on terms of what are competitors' pricing, because they do the bundles and they do the promotional for the first 6 months, you pay one price and then, you know, it changes and you gotta call them and all that.
I know that trend.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things that we like to talk about with new fibers, like here's your flat rate, you know, it's what you're gonna pay for the next year or 5 years or however long it's been. And there's no gimmicks, no, we're not gonna change it on you. You know, they're not gonna ask you to bundle it and to get a lower price or anything like that.
Yeah. So competitive market is always, this is a really hard one on here. It's different with sewer and water is no one else is offering that service. But
We also have to open our books, you know, we kind of open our books
Yeah.
because we're a public agency. And
there you go.
Part of me wonders, and this just asking out loud, do we prevent a competitive market by undercharging the market by so much?
They weren't here before, you know.
Yeah.
No, believe me, I know.
Yeah.
So we were here before, and I don't believe that's the case at all. In fact, when we go and speak, and I get asked all the time, one of the great things about Sandy's model is how we changed the market in our area. One, they weren't here before, but when they came, and when we said no contracts, guess what Wade did? No contracts, right?
Mhm.
No, it's not heard of anywhere else. You have to have a contract for 2 years, and you break, and you pay all this, right? And so that's a huge thing there. They lowered their price. Now, is it down to our price? No, but it's much lower than other communities out there, and they've, you know, their engineers and back end, so they've looked at Sandy. They came and met with Sandy back with Seth and Joe, and they're like, how did you get it down? You know, well, obviously we're not a multi-big corporation in Seattle trying to, you know, have all this other infrastructure, but so, and profit in Wall Street, so, but, and we're just lean and nice, as my folks are saying.
Cool.
Anyway, that's the kind of the background of it.
And beyond that, George already talked about, water and sewer rates are not included in this update. We'll bring those back to council once we have an updated model from FCS group.
Mhm.
And then, public safety fee is not included in this listing because that's yet to be determined and authorized, so we'll talk about that a little more later tonight.
Can you remind me, Jordan, what's our timeline on the study coming back?
We're trying July 15. We have a meeting with them next week to look at the model, so we'll have a better sense after Wednesday
Right.
of how close we are. So
Okay.
looking hopeful.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'll be back in a little bit.
You wanna go back to transit?
Got you warmed up?
So how did you get here this evening?
By transit?
Well, I ran from the library.
Nice. It's a great night to run. 90. I ran last night in the 80-degree weather, but tonight would be.
Now, do we need to hurry along so you can go catch? I remember
No,
last time.
I
you were
actually,
here.
I drove.
Oh, uh-oh.
No, but I parked at the other end of town, so it was a nice walkout, but anyway.
Which end of town? Fred Meyer's or the
Yeah,
library?
that, not quite Fred Meyer. Is that kind of pretty good? Wait, this is 80s. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I was at the bowling alley on a field trip and I saw one of our transit deals in Gresham. It's always fun to invade Gresham with our transit.
You should have hopped on with a bunch of
Yeah.
second and third graders or first and second.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
60 of them would have overwhelmed your. That would have been awesome.
Is the moon a full moon
I know,
tonight?
there's something. Okay.
Well, welcome
having me again. I'm Michelle Poyero, I'm the transit planner. Please excuse the casual dress, I'm a little flummoxed by the weather.
Carl apologized.
Yeah, Carl, he's.
I'm bringing the informality down.
Appreciate it.
It's gonna work.
Come between me and Stan.
Hey, man, I'm mayor, baby.
Let's see.
Since I last was here, we collected a bunch of public input. We went out, we asked people about a couple of big choices that come up. Some of the choices come up in every transit plan, some are particularly Sandy. And so I want to do two things. I want to just like revisit a little bit of what I said to you at your last meeting that I was at, and then tell you what we heard from the public, and then listen to what you have to say about what we should put in the plan. So, little refresher. This is a line graph that shows ridership relative to service levels, so bang for buck, on all the Sandy services over the last 10 years. So I'll start at the bottom. The purple line is the elderly and disabled out-of-town medical transport. That's very specialized, it's very expensive, and so only people who really need it can use it. The blue line is the dial-a-ride and paratransit. About 3 people an hour are moved by that service. 3 people per hour of a vehicle on the road. The shopper shuttle, introduced in 2016, is moving about 7.5 people per hour, so they drive around. The Estacada Express, green line, ridership fell a lot in 2013, 2014 when fares were introduced, economy got better, college enrollment dropped, which things changed. Moving about 6 people an hour, 5.5, 6 people per hour. And then the Gresham Express, same kind of ridership dynamic as we see on the Estacada Express, as we see on actually every intercity transit route in Oregon. Still the highest ridership route, moving 10 or 11 people per hour that's on the road. So there's 2 reasons, at least 2 reasons this graph is interesting. One is it helps you see what trend you've just been through. So there's just been a big drop in ridership that's not at all unique to Sandy. It's very general, has to do a lot with macroeconomic forces like employment and very low interest rates for car loans. Also has to do with, oh, that's what interest rates.
Question. We have to raise our hands here. That's okay. I'm informed, folks. Remind me where it was that we started charging $1 for restaurant.
Yeah.
2014.
So you're,
It's where that dropped off.
So hard,
yes.
So it included not just.
so not just at macroeconomic forces.
It's also the dollar.
Also, very local, very microeconomic forces like an infinite increase in the cost of riding a bus.
We didn't charge $1 more for the Estacada, correct?
Yes.
Did we charge $1?
Any
for Estacada?
out-of-town trip costs $1. So you can ride either of those routes within Sandy for free, but if you want to go to Estacada,
Right.
if you want to go to Gresham, it's
I thought we just did the Gresham.
No.
Thank
Thank you.
Homeless folks.
So yeah, it's not just macroeconomy, it's also charging the fare. Shopper shuttle's free.
Right.
Everything in town is free, except Dial-A-Ride.
It didn't used to be when it dropped.
Right.
Because we used to charge in town, and then we brought it because we had a lot of people just going, the one in the town didn't want to ride their bike uphill, and so they hop on and took it. So. But we changed it back to being free to help with the loan or grants.
Yeah, right. So the other thing I like about this graph is it's just a quick snapshot of what kind of ridership is possible from different kinds of service. We have, I would say, we have 3 different types of service on this graph. We have these intercity fixed routes, the Gresham and Estacada Express. They help people go a long distance, a distance that's really too far for you to ask your friend to drive you more than occasionally, or your spouse to drive you more than occasionally, or pay for a taxi or anything like that. Pretty long distance. And they're fixed routes. They come to fixed stops at fixed times. You can plan on them. Then another form is the local circulating fixed route, and that's the shopper shuttle. And it's very common in small town center routes, just like your shopper shuttles. They're a one-way loop. They run in the afternoon. They help kids go places after school. They help people go shopping.
Their graphs look like that elsewhere?
Yeah, and this is about the ridership difference that you expect. Like, the absolute most productive small town circulating shuttle I've ever seen maxes out at 10 boardings per hour. Pretty much all of them do less than that. So.
We have a challenge.
Yeah.
We're almost there now.
Woodburn. Sandy versus
Right.
Woodburn.
Sandy is not competitive. We are.
And then the third type is demand response service, so the dial a ride, the paratransit, out of town paratransit. So demand response services, I mean, a taxi and Uber and Lyft are also demand response services, and they just physically cannot move more than a handful of people per hour per vehicle, just because of what they're doing. They're going around to unique places. Can't be done. So this, it just gives you kind of a nice sense. So if someone says to me, we want higher transit ridership for whatever budget we've got in any given year, I'd say, well, you're gonna need to focus on the types of lines at the top of this graph. Fixed routes, and probably intercity fixed routes that go longer distances than people can walk or bike or have someone give them a ride. So that's a thing that you can demonstrate with this graph.
So one of them that's not on here is the Mountain Express.
Right.
So the reason why they left him off, is it because it's the county versus the city?
Yeah, because it's not city funded. But similar kind of ridership as the Gresham and STK. So, there's a policy level question about ridership, about how important high ridership is to Sandy. Before I get to that, I want to say that if you want high transit ridership, then there's a couple known ways that you get it. You follow the ridership recipe. The ridership recipe is high all day and all week frequency, following patterns of density, walkability, linearity, and proximity. And this is how you bring the most useful service within getting close to the most people. So the most people can reach destinations within a reasonable amount of travel time. It's by following this recipe. So high all day, all week frequency means that the transit's there when they need it. That means both ends of a commute, but it also means, hey, I want to go now, oh, and the bus is coming in 15 minutes, great. Rather than, I want to go now, oh, the next bus is coming in 55 minutes, right? So it's both of those things. The land use factors are incredibly important, and I've explained this to the Planning Commission, and they seem to get a lot out of this, which made me feel great. So density,
There's your challenge.
I think everybody knows that density matters for transit. How many people can get on your bus is how many people are near the bus stop. But density is not enough by itself. You can have high density and have very poor transit ridership because a whole bunch of other things are essential. Walkability. Can people near the bus stop get to the bus stop? Which both means, can they actually walk down the streets to get to the bus stop? Do the streets go through? But it also means, can they cross the road? And so that's a big issue here in places. For example, we're talking a lot about the Vista Apartments.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges in serving the Vista Apartments is that you cannot just stop on 26. Because if you drop people off on their side of the road, they're like, hey, I'm home. But how do they get to the bus stop on the other side of the road to get back into town? They run across the highway. And it's a very severe issue there because running across the highway is terrifying. But it also matters just in places where crossing the road is unpleasant, where it's possible that it's unpleasant. So walkability is essential to high ridership. Linearity. Can transit run in straight lines that feel direct to through riders? So if you can run a route down a road and there's lots of stuff on it, you will get more ridership than if you have to deviate down cul-de-sacs, up hills. And this shape, this low linearity shape often arises from bad walkability. Guess what we're gonna have to do to get to the Vista Apartments? Pull off the highway and drive through the whole loop and get back on the highway. That's okay if that's the end of the route, but it might not be the end of the route forever. And what happens when there's stuff beyond the Vista Apartments? Now everyone riding beyond the Vista Apartments has to ride through the Vista Apartments complex, right, to get back on the highway. So this often comes from poor walkability. You save people from having to cross the road by running a more circuitous service. We're even talking about this down just in this neighborhood off Evans. Like, people can't walk across Evans, so we're gonna run an S-curve through the neighborhood just to be on the correct side of the street to pick them up on their side of Evans. and it comes up all the
Who,
time.
who are these cats that can't?
Yeah, I was like, I'll teach a class.
I
They're just
don't know.
So this comes up at many different scales. Oh, another really important thing to mention is the line at the top is half the length of the line at the bottom, which means for the same budget, you can make it twice as frequent. So when Andy has to run routes that are more circuitous with S-curves and loops, she cannot deliver as good a frequency, which means fewer people will find it useful and fewer people will run it. And finally, proximity, which also has a lot to do with operating costs. Does transit have to cross long, low ridership gaps? Again, this route is half the length of that route. You can make this route twice as frequent, which means more people will find it useful and liberating. So this is how you get high ridership. It's very well established. Other things matter. Fares matter a lot, especially when you go from 0 to any fare. The economy matters, marketing matters, reliability matters, but this is really the core of how you get high ridership relative to your costs.
Gas price matters.
Gas price matters.
Carl, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that you were going through the list of things that all things matter, but don't seem to be as crucial. I know a number of folks, and I'm in this category of older, that have, yes, right. I don't mind informal, I'm also old. I get it. Understandability. And one of the things that I was really impressed with was the app that Andy put out here a year ago or so. And I was explaining this to somebody who's actually older than I was. There are people older than I was in this community.
Few.
And they were just amazed that they could watch the little
Yeah.
chopper thing go around and around and anticipate. That doesn't make a difference as much
It
as some
does.
of these?
It's just small, in like real-time, adding real-time arrival information seems to have a 1 to 2% effect on ridership. So it matters. I mean, it absolutely matters. It also greatly reduces people's stress.
Oh, sure. I can tell when that thing's coming closer.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not, it's not doubling, it's not the same impact as if you could double the frequency within the same cost. Yeah, all those little things matter.
So I know when we changed the whole end of town and went with this transit center place, we knocked off a few different places along the routes, and we brought this up at the last city council meeting when we talked about the whole sidewalk to the east. But it was, bring back the Vista Loops in that and figure out a timing. I know it was really about timing and trying to make this frequency to town and around, because that's super important. I totally believe in that, because I've seen this over time, how it's affected ridership. But, we used to go down here and stop by the post office. I know my wife used to, when she was a teacher at Gresham, would ride it, but there was a place to park her car. Because we were living across, town, and to get there, you couldn't just walk there. The park and rides, right? And being able to do that. So she'd park there. The church's parking lot was being used for that. But then it would also go up to Vista Loop Apartments there. Up there, go through that and come down, which had a large population that would walk or come in there. And I think some of the issues there, we didn't have as frequent of that we do bus rides as we do now. And I know extending adds time, and that's a complex method of trying to fit that in there. But that, seeing that or being able, when you shorten the ride and then disrupt the ridership by going up, we're getting rid of those, because it was like, there's not any parking over here. I mean, there's a few spots, but not like you could at the church parking lot during the week, and then also the weekends. And back then we didn't have Saturdays or Sunday, and then we had Saturday, and now we have some Sunday. But that was a big complaint, is that continuous, all week long.
I'm back.
For those that are, welcome back.
Hi.
Thank you.
That have jobs on those. So I know there's always been the question of, and I've always brought it up ever since being on council, and I know that this transit system goes beyond the 2009 you had there. It's older than that, but was the community college for the kids that live here, being able to stop off at the community college and not get dropped off at that one location. And back, so back to those places where people want to go to.
Yeah,
Lori, we're chatting transit, just so you know.
Oh, okay, very good, thank you.
Yep.
we spent some time this morning drawing future transit routes for within the city and, established that there is no way to add the Vista Loop apartments back in without adding a new bus and driver to to the day, essentially.
Shopper shuttle?
Or adding it to the shopper shuttle, adding a new shopper shuttle essentially. So I would say minimum $70,000 a year operating cost, plus acquiring a bus, storing a bus, maintaining a bus.
We're getting a second shopper shuttle, right?
You have to.
You have to, yeah.
Oh, we do?
Well, it's one bus, it does these two loops, does
Or do
one
you
and
mean the
other.
vehicle?
The vehicle.
You have 2 buses.
We're getting another one, right?
We have one trolley,
Maybe two, one more, right?
right. The other one will primarily be used on Estacada, but it can be used on the shopper
Oh,
shuttle
well.
when the Estacada route is not in operation.
But even though you have the bus, you still have to pay for the operations, and that will be $70,000 minimum. So, proximity, linearity, you know, the trouble with the Vista Apartments is they're not on the way to anywhere else that Sandy's going. So the service has to be justified entirely by the Vista Apartments. Now, I know there will be more growth beyond them.
Another apartment complex being built right now.
Yeah, so they will someday be on the way to somewhere, but that's just a new service addition that's gonna just cost money to have it. There's no way to stretch or squeeze the existing shopper shuttle loops to make that addition work. You basically, to make that addition work, you would make the existing shopper shuttle loops so long and circuitous that people's rides to Fred Meyer would take.
Longer convenient.
Yeah, it would be like a 40 minutes on the bus to get to Fred Meyer. It's like you could just walk, so.
But it's 30 minutes now.
Right.
So, and you're saying the difference between 30 minutes and 40 minutes would just eliminate a segment of our ridership?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, the longer you make it, the more people decide that they're gonna find some other way.
Yeah, I mean, time's money and money.
Yeah. So, those are the land use factors that drive high ridership. Frequency is very important to ridership, as is many days of service, because people, you know, have commutes that aren't just rush hours weekdays. But ridership, getting high ridership relative to cost trades off against another major transit goal that people really value, and that is providing high coverage. High coverage meaning you are close to everyone, even if not very many of them ride. So there is a value to having a route that goes down someone's street or that's in someone's part of town. There's a value to having a dial-a-ride service that's available to everyone, even if you only move 3 people per hour with it, even if it's got, therefore, a higher subsidy per passenger. So then there's all these great things that you get from high transit ridership. You get reductions in vehicle miles traveled and pollution or noise and traffic, and people spend more money on other things besides transportation. It's good support for denser development, walkable development. But then there's all these good things you get from coverage. I mean, actually, there's one really big good thing, which is that it's reassuring to people. It definitely feels good to people to know that the transit's there in case they need it, or in case someone in their life needs it, someone in their house needs it. And sometimes it's also good for people to see the transit is there because they pay for it. Whether or not they ride it, whether or not their employees ride it. So the thing is, these two outcomes trade off against each other. You can't tell a transit agency, we want as much ridership as you can get for your fixed budget and also cover everyone.
You can, you just gotta pay a lot for it.
That's true, you do.
So you got a bigger
A
budget.
lot.
We don't have that kind of money.
Then you become a TriMet.
So like the highest ridership local network within Sandy might be a 30-minute route that goes Fred Meyer, Safeway, maybe it's the densest neighborhood and the Vista Apartments, that's it. And people walk to it because it's coming pretty frequently, and maybe it goes all day. But there aren't hourly routes wiggling down every street. I don't think that's gonna make everyone maximally happy, because I think a lot of people do really care about coverage. They do really care about everyone having access to service in case they need it, even if it's not the highest ridership in the station.
So there's probably a balance between getting people back and forth from one side of the city to the other really fastly, but maybe 2 or 3 stops to do that, and putting in another shuttle that has a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of stops all over the city. And wouldn't they balance each other? At one point, you're gonna get more people taking this 5-stop Fred Meyer's to Vista Loop shuttle. Somebody else is gonna wanna go this, stop at every other intersections from all the different places they can get in and out of that. Because they've got friends, don't get access, can't walk because they're
Mhm.
disabled or something.
Yeah.
So there is a balance probably, right? And I suppose you do that to some degree?
Every city establishes its own balance. You have a balance. You spend,
So we do.
I did the math, was it 50%?
It's about 60.
60%. You spend about 60% of your budget on fixed routes, in particular the inner city fixed routes that get high ridership and really have potential for a lot of high ridership when the economy goes down. You spend the rest of your budget on the shopper shuttle and dial-a-ride that are just never gonna get a lot of ridership. So I suggest that the way that you evaluate those services is actually different. That you don't evaluate a service like the shopper shuttle on its ridership. It's not competing with the Gresham Express. It's not gonna get as much ridership as the Gresham Express. It has a different purpose. Its purpose is to cover a lot of local streets so that people have access to service in case they need it. Its purpose is also to get people to take it instead of paratransit. Because it is more, it's not as efficient as the Gresham Express, but it's a lot more efficient than paratransit. So there is a balance, you have a balance, but it's like you're spending money towards different goals. Some of the money's being spent towards the goal of high ridership, some of the money's being spent towards the goal of high coverage, access for all. So we asked people about this. We asked them in two different ways. We asked two different major questions. One is how much of the budget should be spent pursuing high ridership as opposed to providing coverage where it's needed or expected. This is a policy level kind of question. And then we also asked what's the right balance of investment between local and regional service. They're related because regional service has higher ridership potential than local service in a small town like this. But they're also separate. I think, people can also kind of have separate opinions about this.
So when you say your group, you're talking the stakeholder group that you put together?
Yeah, so we asked the stakeholder group, we asked people through an online survey, and we asked people through a paper survey. The stakeholder group said they had a modest preference for higher ridership as a goal, as an overriding goal.
What was the background of the stakeholder group? Don't even know the people. What was the background of these people?
Some social service people, some planning people, some business people.
Lori was on it.
Lori
I was
was on
going
it.
to, but I got hurt.
So it was a really good mix of people in the community and surrounding area. I thought they did a really good job of getting a real well-rounded group.
Okay, it wasn't 18 people he pulled off the bus saying you're the stakeholder group.
No,
Okay.
it was like civic people.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And they had a whole training before we asked them this question. They're trained now.
They're transit planners.
Also, I asked them, I said, fixed routes and demand response have very different ridership potentials and they have different purposes. And I asked this group, for trips within Sandy, just for local travel within Sandy, which do you think should be a higher priority? Providing more demand response, meaning more dial-a-ride, or providing more fixed route service? And they almost unanimously said fixed routes rather than demand response because of that higher ridership potential. We asked a lot of people through the online survey, and this question, there was a modest preference for higher coverage. People said they would rather see new routes serving areas that have no service today than improvements to existing routes like higher frequencies or more days or hours of service. So slight, modest preference among this group for more coverage. Then we asked on a paper survey, and they had a modest preference for the higher ridership strategies, for higher frequencies, more hours of service on existing routes. Of course, more of the paper survey people were on the buses. Some of the paper surveys were not given away on the buses, but some of them were.
So it seems to me that you've got, your trained people have some sort of technological way to evaluate, and the people who are on the online and the paper survey were more just users, observations. I was one of those 185 people that did online.
Throws the whole thing off.
I know, it did, yeah, too informal. But anyway, it was more of a perception about what people, I thought, needed to be into the buses, rather than a technologically understandable kind of a group of people. And I'm not for that. Which group do you put more emphasis on in this survey?
Well, I don't know. I mean, conveniently, the online survey and the paper survey people sort of had the, you know,
The same thing.
modest preference in opposite direction. I don't know who I put more weight on. I guess I would kind of put that up to you,
Mhm.
actually.
Okay.
I don't know if I have an opinion about that.
I'm thinking about what kind of biasness is in this,
Uh-huh.
because I see certain levels of biasness in all three of these groups.
Yeah.
And I would prefer one over the other, I think, to my own self, but, just wondering if you're gonna present us a proposal that looks like what some group or another would be thinking of.
I would rather hear from you, actually. There's no technically correct way to weight these people's input.
Would there, one way of looking at it be trying to improve the satisfaction of your current ridership group versus appealing to the stakeholder group that doesn't maybe utilize the services currently as much? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think of the online survey participants, you know, many fewer of the online survey participants ride the bus than the paper survey participants. So I think that is a case of people who don't ride saying, you know, they're gonna have a little bit of a bias towards, oh yeah, you should add more service, because they're more likely to live someplace where there isn't
Right.
service. And the people who do ride, obviously, are in a situation where at least some existing service does work for them, because they're riding it. And they would of course like to see it improve, so there's that bias. I
Andy,
mean-
how many of our current riders complain that they want more routes on our current schedule?
Most of what we hear back from the current riders is more about frequency. They'd like more Saturday service, they'd like more Sunday service. They'd like it to run longer, although we run till 10 o'clock.
So it's the folks that are used to our current routes that just would like to see it, the bus at their stop more often.
Yes, but that being said, when we survey, like she said, there are people who are using the service. So,
Right.
you know, maybe someone's not using it. I mean, the flip side is we got great feedback when we introduced the shopper shuttle to the school in Jewelberry, because they hadn't had service on
Mhm.
that end of town.
Mhm.
And so we heard, wow, we're so excited that there's something here.
Especially when you have that bus going around, it looks so cool.
Mhm.
Right,
Oh, yeah, right.
it
I love that.
definitely helps.
Yeah.
Yes, if you were to pull out of all three of those surveys, only the people who ride buses, what kind of response did you get?
I don't have the charts in front of me.
Mhm.
But the people who ride buses were more likely to say improve the existing routes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Let me show you the next slide also, because it has bearing on this question of adding routes versus improving the routes you have. We asked people, would you rather have to walk a little farther for service or wait a little longer for service? Or another way to say it is, would you rather have a shorter walk to service or a shorter wait for service? And the people who took the online survey said they had a modest preference for shorter waits rather than shorter walks. What that implies is fewer routes, or no more routes, and instead higher frequencies on the routes you have. So, you know, you've got a route going down one street, there's a parallel street over there, but instead of adding yet another route over there that also comes once an hour, you make this route come every 30 minutes instead of every 60, those people walk over to it. Not everyone can walk, but most people can walk, and they walk over to it. The paper survey, also, the people who took the paper survey had a slight preference for shorter waits rather than shorter walks. And we ask this question a lot in different communities, and even in like icy place, like even in Anchorage, people said, oh, I'd much rather walk an extra couple blocks than if it gets me a more frequent route. I want to travel when I want to travel, and I don't mind walking a little further to do it.
So a shorter walk is a couple blocks, not a mile.
Right, so this is not relevant for the Vista Apartments, for example.
Right.
We're not asking them if they'd rather walk to the bus. They can't walk to the bus. It's too far and too many barriers. This is really about route spacing within town. This is relevant to the S-curve we were drawing on parallel streets, right? Can we go down one of those streets and ask people on the other streets to walk another couple
Like
blocks?
Pleasant Street walking to 26.
So this kind of goes to more routes or improvements on existing routes. So now this question about inter versus within city service. The stakeholder advisory group, great majority said that intercity service seemed more important to them to add. If service is being added, that it should be added for intercity, which could mean Gresham, could mean Estacada. I can't remember if I floated the idea with that group yet of eventually in the long term working towards a route that connects people to Clackamas Town Center via Damascus. But that's what they said, that should be the emphasis rather than a lot of more local service. The online survey, slightly more support for intercity service, and then the paper survey, people were equally divided between intercity service and local service being important. So that's what we heard from people in this round. Most people are in a hurry and they don't mind walking a little bit if it gets them there faster. And people do value high ridership and wide coverage, but slightly more people value high ridership more. They're telling us, I'll walk farther for more frequency, ridership is important, and emphasize intercity service more than local service. So those are the takeaways that I see. But again, these are different sources, different people with their biases, and I don't think the weighting of them is straightforward. So I'm happy to hear about that from you, as well as if you have an opinion about what the focus should be in this plan. And just to tell you, I should mention, by the way, in the plan, we are going to have a bloom scenario in which all of the straight line growth in tax revenues keeps going up in a straight line. And then we're going to have a gloom scenario in which it goes down, not catastrophically, but a little bit. And also maybe there's a political change that cuts some other transit funding sources. So we are going to show what would get cut first if something had to get cut. That will be, I'm sure, contentious in the draft plan.
So, did you put any recognition into some of the outside pressures that we're feeling right now? For example, Boring wants us to be able to provide a ridership through that. I know that the Clackamas County as a whole, one of their thoughts were to have additional transit connections between cities and such, and their Clackamas Town Center is a really good thought in terms of connecting that way. So there was any incorporation of those kind of pressures into their study?
Yes, and we've been talking to the Clackamas County staff. They're just starting a transit planning process, so we're ahead of them. But we've been talking to them about it. We have been talking to people in Boring. Boring has the good fortune to be on the way between Sandy and Damascus. So if
City of Damascus.
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
It's now the city.
Sandy and
last month.
Clackamas Town Center. So, if someday there's a route that does that, Boring will be on the way and therefore gets service. Yay! Boring is so small, I wouldn't be floating this idea if it were just to go to Boring. I think that you wouldn't be able to justify that compared to all the other things you can be doing with Boring. So, but also this idea would not be Sandy's to pay for. This would be, there's multiple parties who could be involved in funding this, including TriMet, Clackamas County,
To the big
Boring,
metropolitan
Sandy.
Happy Valley.
TriMet will be,
yeah.
can be a part of paying for some of our transit.
They didn't say they would pay for it, but they run service to 174th. From
45th, Route 145th.
So they run service, out Sunnyside Road, and long term, I don't see why there couldn't be a route that's jointly funded that goes from Sandy to Clackamas Transit Center. Rather than having this route duplicate the TriMet.
Boring opted out of TriMet,
They did.
Yes.
similar to us, but then they didn't do their own system. How does that come into play in that? Would it? It would, wouldn't it? 'Cause there wouldn't be funding.
Well, business tax.
Well, TriMet is not going to operate in Boring. They're gonna go up to 145th, or if they, their jurisdiction gets larger, then they might go a little further, but, we had quite a discussion. Clackamas County would like to see, I think it was 172nd, that they would like to see routes created with the new STIF funds, that then we could partner to start kind of having a hub within that area that currently doesn't have service. And TriMet was in the room this morning, one of their planners, and so, they're not gonna commit, but they're willing to discuss the planning of partnerships in that area. And the new funding, does encourage partnerships, it's just how figure out which one gets priority.
Yeah.
Big
But-
elephant in the room mandates everything.
It's a long way away. I mean,
Yeah.
in distance. It's a long distance, and distance is time and time is money. So I'm not saying this would happen anytime soon, or that Sandy should pay for any more of it than the sand part.
Sorry.
So Sandy was kind of the pioneer, the forerunner of this coming out of TriMet and kind of doing its thing. And then some other small cities around Clackamas County, the ones I know personally, have done some. We've got Canby has theirs. I don't know, and I think Malala has some type of line, but all I know is that they have it. I'm assuming they're just kind of going into Oregon City. I could be, but do they have any of the other shopper shuttles and doing some of the other stuff with inside theirs? Or have we matured our product, our transit system, more than they have in, you know, how does that look
Yeah.
for, in comparison to Canby or something?
So Wilsonville is much bigger than your system.
Well, they're a much bigger city, right?
Right.
And they have a big train.
But they have trains.
Sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your night by talking about the train.
They have some express routes
Up and
that
down is
go,
flying cars.
yeah, Intercity Express, and then they have their local circulating network, yes, much bigger network. Canby is a lot like you. They had 2 one-way loops that ran in the afternoons, just like you. They had to cut them in 2009, I think. They kind of went off the fiscal cliff. They cut them, they got their books balanced again, they started saving money, and I think they're, thanks to Stiff, also they're gonna be able to add them back.
And do they go to Oregon City?
They go to Oregon City and Woodburn, and they are actually working on a collaboration with Salem Kaiser Transit
Wow.
to see if they can get a seamless ride from Oregon City to Salem,
Hmm.
which is the kind of thing that I'm kind of thinking about in terms of Sandy. I mean, you're already doing that actually for Mountain.
Timberline aggression.
Right? And Sandy to Clackamas Town Center could be another one of those, and then Oregon City to Salem. And the STIF funds do explicitly point at this kind of cross-jurisdictional, cross-boundary collaboration as something that they want to see.
You say cross boundaries, that one ticket? Because right now you can go to Timberline all the way, what, Forest Grove or something? And
Yeah, so, when I say seamless, I'm being deliberately vague about whether you are on one bus the whole way, or you get off that bus and get on a different bus. Like the Gresham Express to Mount Hood Express experience is really seamless. Like, you come into town, and they're like, oh yeah, your bus is right behind us, you're gonna make your transfer at this stop. Oh, okay, get off this bus, get on that bus, I'm done. There's no waiting, there's no uncertainty. So that's a seamless transfer. It can also just be one bus that goes the whole way, that you don't even have to get off. One ticket can pay your whole way, or, you can just honor tickets on each other's buses. There's lots of ways to do it. There's no one correct way, but there are better ways, less better ways. Yeah.
So, does this ever pay for itself?
No.
There's no way for this to even come close.
Even the airlines don't pay for themselves. Massive federal subsidy.
Probably everybody come close, but then they make us sit with minuscule little. It's the reason why I got bad.
No, the normal, so the highest fare box recovery in the nation is New York City, obviously, but all the big cities, New York, Chicago, Boston, huge percentages of people riding transit. Fares are actually fairly high. And they recover 30% of their operating costs from fares. And that doesn't, we're not even talking capital, we're just talking operating. So transit, like roads, are not a business line.
They probably never will, it sounds like.
Nope.
Not even close.
Hey, even Uber and Lyft are losing copious money every year.
So we're doing it for all the right reasons, not for the business
You're not in
reasons.
it to make money.
Welcome to local government.
You are losing money
No, hey,
for a
it's
good
a
cause.
shot. No, you're making
I'm learning quickly.
it's about livability,
Yeah.
local government livability.
Oh,
Now,
sure.
higher
Environmental
ridership
reasons.
does mean, fares do matter, recovering 5% more of your operating budget through a fare helps. But, it's never gonna balance, it's not gonna make money. And there is a little bit of a zeitgeist in the nation right now, and it's funny how these things just come up at the same time in different places, but some agencies are saying like, I guess it's because ridership is falling, and agencies are saying, hey, is it possible that the cheapest way for us to increase our ridership is just to stop charging? Like, rather than spending $100,000 more
Is
on
that-
frequency, what if we just sacrifice that fare revenue? Wouldn't we get more ridership?
And then you get more grants. Cause that's what we were talking about, like, that went down, and grants are based on ridership,
Yeah.
so then, oh, let's do the in-town to get the ridership.
Yeah.
And one reason for dropping them was so we could get more frequency, because not as many people with bikes, and Mike's thinking I'm crazy. Oh. But the other.
Majority that thinks you're crazy.
But the other part of it was, it helped, it also had a different effect too. I'm not trying to get into the politics of this, but one of them was the transit population moving along for the free meals through Gresham, and then over here we had a couple churches that the bus would come right up close to, that, you know, they could come over and get a lunch here, and then another day was over here, and then they'd go to Gresham on this thing, and then that basically stopped when we stopped having free bus rides to
Yeah.
Sandy. So we were bringing people from Portland, Gresham out to have free lunches and back. But it helped with our getting grants.
Yeah, well, if you ever wanna go check out, it's bigger than your system, but it's still smallish, a small city system that's free, go to Missoula, Montana, ride their bus. Full system's free, they have huge ridership. But there's there's a long delay between when you start getting higher ridership and when it starts showing up in your grant allocations.
I'm there all the time.
It
Are
takes a
you
couple
sure you
years.
want us to do? I'll do it.
There's a delay, and then the other thing I say is, like, those grants
Yeah.
get reauthorized every 6 years by Congress, and I wouldn't make any promises that
They're there.
it's gonna stay the same, the incentives coming out of the FTA are gonna be the same.
We have a spectacular grant writer, so we're not worried.
We do, and I think that's where it can be. I don't know anything about Canby, but I know from C4 how Sandy always shined in this whole transit, where other cities were really hurting for this, and partly because of our great grant ridership and the leadership we had there on that. But then we learned at C4 that this funding from the feds was really shrinking. The ability to get some of those grants, we were still getting them, other people weren't.
Mhm.
Was what kept
Right.
on being told to us, that one day we aren't going to be able, because they're just eliminating it, because things stem back to the fuel tax,
Yeah.
and then how that, which got overspent and didn't come back, it affected nationwide.
Yeah.
So
Also, I should mention that part of what happened when you left the TriMet district, and part of the reason I think you are able to get relatively high ridership for a city your size, is that you have access to a pretty low operating cost and high quality operations. So, like, your operator's good and not very expensive.
well, it wasn't very hard to go up from what we had.
So, for.
I mean, I
you
can
have
put my face.
you have
So you do an awesome
$100.
job. I'm not. You do an awesome job.
You have $100, and your contract operator can turn that into more than 2 hours of service on the road, and you don't get that in Portland or Wilsonville or even Canby. So that is a real advantage, and that may not be permanent. Sometimes, especially with small operators, relatively small changes, like short-term changes in things like healthcare, costs or labor can change the costs, so that may change, but it's definitely a good thing you have going.
Do you see in your studies in other areas where when the gas prices go up significantly, that builds ridership? It's with the clean energy program that has a 22-cent gas tax increase in Oregon. So I was wondering if other areas saw more ridership in those circumstances.
Gas prices have an interesting effect on transit ridership. They have a significant effect in the short term
Mhm.
and an insignificant effect in the long term.
Ah.
So it's like people respond, if gas prices go up a lot, people will start taking the bus in the short term. But then as life comes at them, the
They slowly
gas
work it into their
prices
budget.
don't
It's like a diet.
change how they, yeah, it's like a diet. Exactly. There you go.
Use it, it's a tagline.
Yeah. People adapt to the higher, and then they just go
Yeah,
back to
they
the
go
direct.
back to the way it was. Habit.
In any of the analysis that you have of all these, the trained ones, the awesome gurus, and then shopper people, those paper people and the online people, was there any of the things that were identified as a really hot spot that we should be sending the buses to, that we are not at this point?
Oh, Vista
Excluding
Apartments.
Vista.
No, Vista Apartments. That was really.
That's the only one, really?
Yeah.
And then we brought up, this, whatever, $4 million, tomorrow $8 million sidewalk, how much bus riding can we do
Speaking of
for
political influences.
being a little exaggerated, but not too much on the price tag. But
Yeah.
I'm surprised something on the south side didn't come up, because it's kind of a long ways away from where all of our.
Well, I mean,
Well,
the
shopper shuttle
shopper
goes
shuttle
down.
goes all the way down to, Cascade,
I'm out running and I see this thing everywhere.
And
Does
the
it go to
SR
Orange County?
Everywhere.
Yes.
And it helps that it's,
I agree.
bright red.
I'm always watching up this.
Yeah,
Anyways.
Well,
I mean, there's not,
Cascadia
there's not a lot of
building.
service, like, you can't travel when you wanna travel, you have to plan around when the Escada route's coming through or when the shop show's
Right.
coming through, but yeah,
Okay.
people need to go get groceries and get out of that neighborhood to do it.
About the retirement centers, I know we used to go up here to the retirement center when we cut it back, but the shopper shuttle, is the shopper shuttle?
You go right by and stops right there. I've seen some people.
Hopped on.
I've stopped there.
Yeah. You're pretty much
That makes
going
sense.
everywhere that's built so far, except the apartments maybe beyond the transit depot.
I hope they're
Or-
walking
They're walking this, yeah.
to the transit center and off the bus.
But I do wanna mention that, this is a map of your zoning, and we recolored it so that we could see the transit intensity of different zones. So the red is central business district, and then this pinkish is general commercial. So we are right here in the pinkish, and this yellow, light yellow is the Vista Apartments. And like, this is Fred Meyer and Safeway, and here's Fred Meyer. Safeway Community Center. There's a high school. So, I'm looking at this, I think I might have mentioned this last time, I can't remember. I'm concerned about the commercial zoning, these little islands of commercial zoning, because that's gonna be expensive to send a bus to, and it's gonna be a bus that doesn't go very many times a day, and so not very many people are gonna look at it.
But they're gonna pay the transit tax.
But they're gonna pay the transit tax. So this is, yeah, so when I see this is a coverage obligation, coverage obligation, coverage obligation, coverage obligation, coverage obligation. Not very many people are gonna ride, you're gonna have to send a bus to it, it's gonna cost $7,000 a year, and, but there's line on the map, and there's a bus stop in the ground. So, I just wanted to point that out, because, I'm hearing things from people, like, the planning commission's talking about wanting, community to be more transit-oriented. There are things in the development code, there are things in your current comprehensive plan that say you want all this transit-oriented development. In fact, this zone, the village commercial, is described as transit-oriented development. But it's only transit-oriented development in that it has sidewalks and some density, but it's not located in the right place to be actually transit-oriented. Or it's not high ridership transit-oriented development, because it's not in the right place.
One of the reasons why we identify those as commercial is because we feel like that's our growth areas. So as we do grow, we happen to have a lot of growth at this point, don't see any change in that. We see numbers of people moving in those directions. And so some of those little small red spots are places of, we think, growth in intensity in terms of peoples. And I'm hoping that as those growths happen, that you'll get more potential ridership, more people will be wanting to be out of that, more people will be living there, more people will end up having markets, those kind of things.
But what she's saying is it's gonna cost us a fortune to get there.
And
Well,
to-
as you grow though, I mean, maybe we can pay for those
But
things.
to get
Where are you
there-
gonna go to if you don't do some of those
To
things?
get there, you have to pass through low-density places, that's the issue.
I understand that.
If you had a pink band going up, pink band going towards there, pink band going towards there, then you drive a bus down the road and you're passing people all along the way. But to go through single-family residential,
Yep.
and then you get to the little commercial node, you're spending a bunch of money to not pick up.
So I wonder when we did the, village concept, back when they put that together, if transit was even thought of. I know they make you put in those little pads for the bus stop, and then we took all the bus stops away because the people were vandalizing them. There's the pads for all these places to have bus stops all over the city, right? But these village things, they Do we even have a study like I don't think we did a we didn't even have a bus system then, so we wouldn't have.
You can hire very smart transit professionals who will do a transit-oriented development plan for you that completely ignores operating costs.
Sure.
So, that is ignoring the fact that if you have to cross a bunch of empty distance, that's operating costs for which you're not serving any riders. So we see lots of TOD developments that are on the way far side of the freeway, down a one-way road, that mandate a high-cost, not very useful, infrequent, expensive bus line, but they're still TOD because of their physical design. So this is something I'm adding. I want to add this to the decade-long conversation your city's having is, I like the village commercial design very much, but it has to be located in the right places for it to be high ridership transit oriented. Otherwise, it is high cost, low ridership transit oriented.
Just another reason we need to update our master plan.
One more.
But you're telling me that there's no way, ever that we're gonna pay for this thing as a balanced budget, so I'm thinking to myself, as long as I've got some great grant writers.
Is that why you
I'm
showed
not
up?
even sure why I need to worry about cost. No, I need to worry about ridership, because that's the length of the talks between creates some problems, or could be a kind of
Now, that doesn't go.
transit you have there. So when would that become an economic reason? I suppose do grants say we need to be economical?
Like have a certain number of riders?
No.
Yes.
I'm thinking about just the business side, how many dollars we get in, that sort of thing, or how much travel time we have without too many people changing the business side, the economic side of the equation.
Yes, we report performance measures monthly,
That makes a difference in our.
and it makes a difference, and every time we write a grant, it's heavy on performance measures and cost per ride, cost per mile. Yes.
None of our general fund goes to transit currently, correct?
That's correct.
Which is unique, is that right? Is that unique for Canby or having,
No, Canby's in the same situation you're in.
okay, others,
They also have payroll tax.
but, it doesn't come from the general fund, and we're
It
very
would-
fortunate it doesn't have to.
Woodburn uses their general fund, or used to.
So we gotta fix our villages, okay.
Yeah, and I like the village, I really do, I would like them better if they weren't in archipelago.
Okay, no one builds village business anyway.
If they were a peninsula.
We've
But then
only
it would,
built one of
then
those
it's not a
in
village,
Newport.
it's a, yeah, you don't have to care about ridership. I mean, certainly the ridership will affect your competitiveness for grants, but aside from that, I don't need you to care about ridership. You can tell me to design a very high coverage plan, not worry about how many riders you're getting per hour on your vehicles, and I'll do it, and I can do a good job at it. But, when I hear people talking about, we want less traffic, we want, people to spend less money on transportation, then those are the things that come from high ridership. So that's a reason to care about it, at least with some of your budget. Right now, you're caring about it with, say, 50 or 60% of your budget.
One of the things that I'm wondering about is that we're talking about a pass-by, getting rid of all of our traffic downtown. Those people that are going up the mountain, back down into the city, and that sort of thing. I wonder how much influence that would have on what the long-term vision of this transportation plan is, and how we move people from one side of the city to the other, as we get more walking friendly downtown, as we get more local kinds of traffic, rather than people traveling as much in the traffic dense kind of location we have in our city now. So in 20 years from now, I'm wondering, would that make a difference in the way we vision our transit activities? I don't know if that's true or not, but
If
I'm wondering.
basically, the question is, as if we become a more walkable community, right? How does that dictate?
In
our
20 years,
transit
we'll
plan?
update this 2 more times.
True.
Right?
In 20 years, you and I won't be here to see it.
I tend to be here, I tend to be giving Stan a bad time, because get away from being a mayor.
It'll be my daughter.
But you know what, 20 years from now goes really fast. Yeah, your daughter will always be sitting there. And your daughter. I don't have a daughter. But I'm just wondering, 20 years does go by very quickly, and sometimes, before you know it, I've been here 8 years, you've been here, what, 25, something like that.
You know,
Sorry.
one thing that occurs to me is that right now, you're in a very good situation with regards to transit because you are on the way
Yeah.
between Portland, Mount Hood, and
Sure.
Bend.
Yeah.
So you have a bus to Bend twice a day.
Just
And
stop
they're-
at like a Safeway or something.
Yeah, and it's not stopping, it would not like go out of its way to drive over to San Diego stop. It's stopping
It's
because
a
you
long haul
are on the way.
route.
Yeah. And, the whole Mount Hood Express connection is a benefit of being on the way. So once you have a bypass, then all those, and by then, there may be yet more transit actually going this way. But then those transit providers have to make a choice, which is, do they take the most direct ride from Portland to Bend, or do they stop at San Diego? And it's no longer the same thing. So that's a little downside.
On the
to
bypass, you
not
have a
being-
gas station with a telephone booth right
On the
next
way.
to it. You stop there.
It is, I mean, being on the way means traffic in all kinds of contexts. If you're on the way, you get the traffic. But it also means whatever opportunities
You're on
come
the
with
way.
that traffic. You're on the way.
Any discussion about Mount Hood Community College? Being able to go directly with Sandy?
So-
Because they
transit?
are our community college.
They are our
Yeah.
community college, not
Yes.
Clackamas Community College.
So if people wanna go to Mount Hood Community College from here, they would ride the Sandy Gresham Express to Gresham Transit Center.
Yeah.
And then there's a bus departing every 15 minutes. to
Wrong
Mount
answer.
Hood
Yeah,
Community College.
no. Tell you, just,
I tried this morning, we had a long conversation.
it's the number one thing since I've been on council I've asked is
Yeah.
that community college, all these high school students graduating don't have to, we have huge ridership, great for our community, great livability.
So here's what that means, say you have a college class, say you have a class starting at 9 AM. That means you can leave here and you can get to your college class no more than 29 minutes too early. Because when you get to your class is dictated by the schedule of the bus from here. It comes every half hour. Worst case, you get there 29 minutes too early. If Sandy were to run a bus directly to Mount Hood Community College, that would mean another route, a supplementary route. So you've got your route to Gresham, and then you add a route to Mount Hood Community College. Right?
Okay.
Right? So say every half hour the bus goes to Gresham, there's another route that peels off, goes straight to Mount Hood Community College. How many times a day do we think we can run that route? Really? For, say, $70,000.
But you wouldn't need a 20-passenger bus.
It doesn't matter how big the bus is, the operating cost is the same no matter
For
how
all
big
the
the bus is.
10-passenger
You
things?
save a little bit on gas.
Don't
but
take
it-
another bus, just take the one off 26 and just change your route down there and up, which changes the frequency. Maybe we do have to add one for that, but it adds more frequency to it, but you're picking up a major,
So now the Gresham Express.
major.
So, yeah, okay, so we have, say we have half-hourly service towards Gresham, but if you're going to the Blue Line Max,
Mhm.
or downtown Gresham, and all the Portland points, you have hourly service. And if you're going to Mount Hood Community College, you have hourly service. So first of all, I would wonder, how much of your ridership is Mount Hood Community College, and how much is all the other places people can get to from Gresham Transit?
Well, none today.
Right. So I wonder about that, because you would cut your frequency in half, right? You take a half-hourly route and make it hourly for everyone who's not going to Mount Hood Community College, in order to add an hourly route to Mount Hood Community College. Now, if a ton of your old ridership was Mount Hood Community College, maybe that makes sense. The other thing is that now, the bus schedule for someone getting to Mount Hood Community College might get them there way too early for their class, because they can only travel once an hour. Whereas before, the maximum too early they could arrive was 29 minutes. So a more frequent trip, if you get higher frequency buses, even if you have to make a transfer, it often means you spend less time traveling, because you can leave later and still make it on time. And a worse frequency dictates that you often have to leave earlier than you want to and get there and sit there for a long time. So I've done a lot of surveying at community colleges, and there are actually a lot of students at community colleges who got to campus 40 minutes before their class started because that's when the bus goes by. So that's a thing about dividing your route into more variations, is that each variation will have worse frequency, which will make the travel cost higher in time, but saves transfer. So sometimes the fastest trip isn't actually the one-seat ride, it's the transfer with the more frequent routes.
So we'd be better off getting John to work on getting that satellite campus in Sandy.
If the Mount Hood Community College campus were on the way, this would
Then
all
we'd
be much
already be getting
easier.
it, so.
So that's my caution about dividing. When you divide service into more routes, you worsen frequencies, which means you increase waiting times. And so, you know, sometimes we ask this question. We ask people not, would you rather walk farther away? We say, would you rather have a trip that takes longer, but you don't have to transfer, or a trip that takes less time, and you get there closer to when you want to get there, but you have to transfer? And that is the trade-off that applies in this case. Now, if the majority of the riders back in, say, 2013 were Mount Hood Community College students, I would say maybe that's the right thing to do, because it really would make a difference, you know, to not have to deal with the transfer and the uncertainty around the transfer and everything. But we don't have that data yet.
When I asked this a long time ago on council, they said that it wasn't allowed, TriMet would not allow it. If you're going into their district, you had to go to the transit station, you could not go to anywhere else but to and from their transit center, and you couldn't stop anywhere else. It
They
wasn't
do
allowed.
not want you to compete with them.
Right. So it wasn't allowed to do that. We were able to go, and on the way, we used to pick up people, which we stopped
Yes.
because slowed it down. People were just using the Sandy bus to go from Burnside to downtown and back, you know, do their shopping, and that was taking up a lot of valuable time for them.
I mean, my experience riding transit from where I am in Portland to here has been that, you know, this works for me. It doesn't today because I sprained my ankles in the walk. But this works for me because the bus is so frequent.
Yeah.
It means I can arrive at a meeting here no more than 29 minutes too early. And I travel to other places in the region where the frequency is worse, and I am off, you know, I'd be sitting in Canby at an hour and 10 minutes before I wanted to.
And we used to be that way.
Because that's what the frequency was.
And we increased it and our ridership went up.
So, that's the trade-off. You can have more routes, you will have worse frequencies.
Unless it snows and then
Yeah,
they all
that's
be
what I
delayed.
just said.
So let me go back to the big picture questions.
I kinda like where we're at. I think the 60/40 is pretty darn reasonable.
I wanna hear what Andy thinks we should do.
Thank you.
You're my expert here.
So I think in a town our size, we have pretty good coverage, especially in 2016. We rerouted Estacada through town instead of highway express service only, and we added the shopper shuttle. So between those two, I think we have excellent coverage for the moment. Eventually, we need to talk about some of the new development and how we are gonna service those. The conversation she had about land use is very important, and I think transit should be included in that thought process in the future, because it's very expensive to serve. Even Vista Loop is gonna be pretty expensive. And right now, to be perfectly honest, it makes me nervous to think of making the left turn into Vista Loop and down to pick people up across a highway every 30 minutes. So I'd like to see some improvements up there as well. As I'm assuming as that neighborhood develops, that there will be some improvements in the left turn into Vista Loop off of Highway 26. So I think we are in a really good place right now. I think that, and actually one of the comments from the stakeholder group that I thought was an important point that I didn't realize through their answer was when they said they supported us putting more money toward coverage, it was because they felt like our fixed routes or, you know, more of the demand response coverage, they felt like our fixed route service was already so good and could handle capacity that we didn't need to focus on, expanding that service. So, yeah, I think we're doing a really good job of covering.
Estacada has been going down, the ridership's been going down. And, no, everything's paid for through grants, but do they kick in anything?
They do, and they are a good partner.
Who's they?
And
That's
the
in
city of Estacada,
Estacada?
they are in TriMet's jurisdiction and still continue to, give us some funding for the Estacada route, although they are also paying payroll taxes to TriMet, so,
Is that coming out of their general fund?
so.
And does it come close to meeting costs?
No, so we use two types of federal funds for the Estacada route, and then theirs and also theirs, but I also feel like that route, we've changed it, we changed the route, which always drops ridership. We added a fare, which drops ridership, and then when our funding went down a little bit, I, reduced it from 5 runs a day to 4 runs, but then made it Monday through Saturday instead of Monday through Friday. So it's a 4 run a day, which is a minimal transit service. In January, we added a run with STIF funds, and I hope soon we'll add another. So I think we'll see it come back up. It's just, there's no frequency on that route currently.
You may have surveyed them, I'm just, what I see that route as is we're bringing their residents over here to shop.
Yep.
And employment opportunities.
It's-
And we have people going that way, maybe not to shop, but maybe some employment. They may go over for shopping, but
I don't know why you don't.
So we do actually commute, they're the highest demographic of that ridership are commuters.
commuters, to get to
And-
Gresham.
And it's equal percentage, actually.
Okay.
I think some of those commuters are actually using Estacada to then jump on TriMet and go further in.
Clackamas.
We also surprisingly have students who live in Sandy and they use Estacada to go to Estacada High. And we have students who
Mhm.
live in Estacada and they
Mhm.
use our service to go to Sandy High. I didn't expect that at all, and it's fairly common. You know, you might want robotics,
Mhm.
but you live in Estacada, so you come here, or you might want something that's only offered at Estacada, or you want a really small school.
Got a great metal application there.
I see that only growing as we expand our commercial offerings for, so they don't have to go to Clackamas or go, and as they build more housing over there. Maybe with the Forest Service moving over here, in a couple of years.
And I think you were correct that more frequent service and giving care and attention to the services that we have should be those.
How much economic development do you think we obtain by helping out and doing the runs to Timberline in our overall? We hear about people flying into Portland and hopping it and going skiing at Timberline without having to rent a car, right?
Right, yeah, evidently you can't put chains on a rental car, so.
Yeah, that's right.
So yes, you take.
You can do 4-wheel drive.
Yeah, if you want to rent a 4-wheel drive.
I can't remember the percentage of people on the Gresham Express who say they're recreating, but
I can't remember either, it's not as high as.
it was like 15 or 20% of the people on the Mount Hood Express say they are recreating.
Do you stop at Ski Bowl too? So they have that new to Mirror Lake, or not, yeah, Mirror Lake and Tom, Dick, and Harry entrance right there.
But a lot of the people on the Mount Hood Express and making the connection with the Gresham Express are just doing kind of like the business of life. They're like visiting their family, going to work, going shopping, going to the doctor.
There's a
Just
lot of
lots of
employees
miscellaneous.
that use Mountain Express.
I hate
A lot of
I hate to admit, I haven't downloaded the app. I know. When you do you have your own unique username
and profile and stuff on that app, or is it just literally seeing?
Just see what you got.
Okay, I was just curious if there was a survey type function off of that app.
Wants to know if
at
you're gonna
all,
track it.
on why you're using it.
Oh, cause then we could know.
Big brother, yeah, no.
It is a nice app. You can tell exactly where they are when you're standing in the cold weather.
Or where they're not.
Never wrote that one down.
Or where they tell you they are.
I see your bus right now.
Anyway, we'll go there.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I can do, I mean, the purpose of a plan is to help, it's definitely to show some ideas, work through some kind of puzzles, like how do we do the shopper service on the south side of town, but also provide some guidance that can help a transit manager deal with things as they come up. So deal with a shrinking budget, deal with a growing budget, increasing operating costs. So something that we sometimes do is we will, in a plan, we will say, you know, the city or the transit agency has as a, it's not a performance measure, I guess it's a policy, a service allocation policy, that X% of the budget is spent on services for which the expectation is that ridership will be high relative to costs, and Y% of the budget is spent on services that have a social coverage purpose. Our ridership is not an expectation, and they are not to be measured based on their ridership. They're to be measured based on customer satisfaction. Do they get close to socially important destinations? Do they help vulnerable people? And so that is the kind of thing, that's the kind of policy that we could articulate, that you could articulate in a plan like this. And that would mean that 3 years from now, if there's a budget cut, or 3 years from now, if there's budget growth, you know, Andy can actually look at add service here, and keep that balance as she does.
Would that work if it's not coming out of our general fund and we're doing it based off grants and you have stipulations within your grant to say this or that? How would that play into effect? Because we can't just move money around to make sure that this section works because the grant is written, or to get it, you know,
Yeah.
see where I'm going?
Yeah, it's complicated, you're right, it's not as simple as I made it seem.
I love your idea though, you can make it that simple.
Yeah, a lot of it, I mean, yeah, a lot of it is driven by grants. What are the incentives coming from other agencies?
So, is there some sort of, general guidance you would like tonight?
Well, I heard,
Or action?
I think I heard you say that you like the current balance. If everyone's like, yeah, seems like we're doing a kind of nice balance right now, then that is, I can do something with that.
Well, I mean, I think the takeaways from tonight is, one is the current, like the current balance, but two is this kind of actually transfers onto us when we start doing our planning stuff, is how transit works into our overall plan for growth and all of that.
Yeah.
Or other master plans or other, as we look at zoning, those type of things.
Yeah. I guess my only other thing I'd ask is this: we're in our planning process and we're looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. I mean, how much do we need to be weighing just, you know, technology and the way in which people travel and everything changing, and I mean, what kind of factors are you looking at, or should we be looking at as we look 20 years down the road?
Yeah, you know, the big things won't change. So, even if we have driverless cars, that would make it really cheap to hire a car, but you still can't fit very many people down a road if they're all in a driverless car. And when they model, like, well, what if we had high occupancy driverless cars? High occupancy just means 2 people per car. You've got 10 people per bus on the Gresham Express, 11 people per bus, right? So you're never gonna get at the kind of space savings that transit gets you, that fixed route transit gets you. Now, your demand response service might be where the most technology has the most potential, because, you know, you're moving 3 people an hour. Well, yeah, you can do that with a driverless car at lower cost. But the bottom line is, if transit, as Sandy grows, transit may play more of a role in congestion reduction. And And then getting dozens of people on a bus at once becomes the key, whereas dividing those people up into even a dozen driverless cars works against you.
But I feel like then, as we grow, wouldn't we maybe look at more of a high ridership style than, because I'm thinking as we grow in our population, we're gonna get the Lyfts and the Ubers, all the ride shares coming in. And so now our coverage, or the opportunities for coverage, even though it's not us doing it, greatly increase for our citizens who are able to get around a lot more easy by just getting on an app, right? Where, I mean, shouldn't we be factoring in some of those with our growth as well as we strategically look at this?
Your daughter will have to figure that out.
So what would change? What would change that would cause transit's role to change?
Well, if I'm someone who is disabled,
Yeah,
right? I'm right now in our town,
yeah.
very dependent on SAM, right, and some of our community services. But as we get more Ubers and Lyfts and everything else, my options increase.
Yeah.
So I'm not as dependent on SAM.
Yeah, but you're still gonna have people who can't afford those options.
Yep.
I mean, Uber and Lyft are never going to provide the deep public subsidy that all transit agencies provide. They're never gonna, they are actually subsidizing rides right now.
Right.
The venture capitalists are subsidizing rides.
Right.
But they're only subsidizing them 30%. You know, they're never gonna subsidize them 70 or 80% the way public transit agencies do.
Mhm.
So you're still gonna have people who can't afford the Uber or the Lyft, or can't even afford the driverless Uber and Lyft if that happens. There's still gonna be a question of how to help those people, what your role is in helping those people. And of course, there are gonna be lots of people who can afford the driverless Uber and Lyft, and so you're gonna have tons and tons of congestion unless you take some position that prevents that from happening. Which cities are just starting to think about, wait, what do we do in a world where we're just overwhelmed by driverless cars?
Right.
What's our role? So, I think the issues don't go away. Like, some of them sort of change height, but they sort of all change height together.
Okay.
Because also at the same time, you get to have driverless transit if you want.
Well, yeah.
So your
That's
transit.
my next question.
Your transit becomes less expensive to provide, just the same way Uber cars become less expensive to provide. So the height changes, but the height all changes at the same time. One other thing that kind of changes at the same time is maybe now, instead of people living like outside of Estacada and working in Troutdale, which seems far away, but maybe now people live on the side of Mount Hood and work in Troutdale because getting a driverless ride there is cheaper. So the goalposts, I think, just kind of keep moving out as the transportation becomes cheaper.
As our population grows too, you just have more ridership statistically to
Yeah.
help with the.
And
And your
it's-
main thing is we're still a bedroom community of Portland, but that, it is just the fact, I mean, a lot of people leave here to go work somewhere
For
else.
now.
As we grow that, our population, will have some of it, but people will come from there to come work in our community
Soon.
right? So- But the point being is that main core trunk line is very.
Yeah. Also, there is at a certain point at which you are going to be, the Census Bureau is going to put you in the Portland UZA.
What? What's this
So
nonsense?
someday Sandy will be part of the Portland urbanized area.
No.
According to the census.
And
The UGB?
no, the UZA.
What's it, what is the?
The
what-
census.
What is
Urbanized. And it just matters because it affects federal transit funding, right?
Yes.
Good or bad?
We'll see. We'll start working on it
So
now.
traditionally, rural transit agencies have gotten greater support per capita
Yeah.
for transit than urban, because urban are supposed to raise more of their own
Right.
funding. You're already raising your own funding.
We're also supplying the workers, because there's a lot of advantage for being in a rural area than working down in the dense areas.
There's a lot of other.
Yeah. There could be some real.
There's other impacts
bumps.
outside of transit with this news too,
The
right?
UZA thing?
Is that a zoning,
No,
that's
it's a
a,
zoning.
as of in urban versus rural? Everything from grants for broadband to, water sewer treatment plants.
So during my triennial review, it was pointed out that as we grow, Kelso Road, that is where we will be close enough that they believe that it could be as early as 2020 to get pulled into the DCA.
The whole city or just that little piece?
So
Which
was that
would
considered when you
shift my
decided to
funding.
grow, or you?
This is the first I've heard of this zone.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't considered that, because our reserve was there, that was, water and sewer lines just depicted on where we grew our urban growth boundary into the reserve, because it flows downhill, so.
I don't know anything about this.
They do
Just
that
for the
green
record,
corridor.
I only know what they told Andy and she told me.
Yes,
Jordan,
it could be very.
Please add it to our list of our work sessions.
The Uzi.
Yeah.
What does UZA
Gun
stand
or
for?
something.
Urbanized, urbanized area?
I'm gonna have to leave at 9 because I have.
Anyway, it's a
I don't know,
census
I've always just
designation.
known it as
6
an
in the
urban
morning,
zone. I don't
but
know
I
what they
support the
call
fee
it.
if we don't get it done by then.
About $50 a month, or what?
Two offices
Well, thanks,
now.
Andy.
Whatever the cost is.
That wasn't-
No.
Did you get what you needed?
I got what I needed.
We did too.
I'm sorry we left you.
For yourself.
Sorry, that was just a bomb drop.
That was a record
Nice.
scratch.
That has
Yeah.
really huge impacting.
It's just one person at FTA, right?
He's out of Washington DC, as a transit consulting firm.
But it's about where we're zoned,
It's
if
about
we're urban or
distance.
rural.
Yes,
That
Maybe we
part of
can
it's.
appeal it or something.
yes.
It's not set in stone yet.
it's- I'm talking to federal government, that's.
What's
hard
this
to-
guy's name?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Thank you,
Well,
Michelle.
thank you.
Thank you,
I'll
appreciate it.
send you, we'll have there'll be a draft plan out for your review, I think in September. And we'll take comments on it, and then we'll do the final plan.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, and I think trip generation stuff is totally fast.
Oh, and by the way, Metro will be here in 2019.
Wow. That was looking forward. Put it into a different bucket.
Oh, right. Talk about
Oh,
money
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Get the money.
Yeah, we won't be offended if you don't hang around for public safety.
Enjoy the warm weather though.
Yeah.
See you later.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are again to discuss public safety fee. Been a couple iterations of this, and most recently, council adopted the biennium 1921 budget with an additional $150,000 of revenue on top of the $370,000 of revenue that the budget committee had approved, for a total of $520,000 of additional outside revenue that we needed to come up with a funding source for to hire the lieutenant and patrol officer for the police department. And so in the staff report, there's a couple of links to prior staff reports that go into additional detail, but the short version of this is taking council's feedback from the prior meetings, looking at implementing a public safety fee. And, oh, it's up on the screen now. And so a little bit further down on that page is a table that kind of outlines how the public safety fee in this proposal would be administered based on customer class and by number of dwelling units. So again, single family, just your standard, detached single family home. Multifamily is anything that's greater than that, so duplex, triplex, apartment complexes, condominiums, anything like that. And then commercial industrial is essentially all the businesses in town. These numbers here are, for illustrative purposes, gets us to the $520,000. I have a document that if we wanted to run other scenarios of what that looks like, we can, go down many different rabbit holes if council chooses to want to do that. But this was kind of the clean first cut of treating residential units, whether they're single or multifamily, at one rate, and then commercial industrial at a bit of a higher rate. And this would not be a phased-in approach in this example, this is just,
Start it. we
Just
do it.
start it.
3
do it, yep.
days, 3 days, right?
essentially, yeah, so we would need, should council choose to go in this direction, we will bring an ordinance, before you on Monday the 17th, with the intent of doing a first reading of that ordinance, taking public comment. If you choose to do the second reading that night, that's, you know, absolutely up to you, or we would push that out to do more, public outreach if needed. And once that second reading is done, the ordinance takes 30 days to go into effect. So, kind of outlined in this implementation section, what a proposed timeline would look like. If everything goes well at the first meeting, we do a second meeting, or a second reading rather, on July 15th. It would become effective August 15th. We do utility billing on August 25th, so we would start seeing that revenue trickle in end of August, 1st of September. As far as filling those positions from the chief's standpoint, as ready to make an offer once. Or, yeah, I'm just, so there's, depending on how quickly council wants to move, staff can move relatively quickly as well for recruiting and
Hold on, chief, you're able to, you're ready to make an offer if that's basically a promotion to lieutenant, but you would still have to turn around and hire a patrol officer and recruit for that, correct?
Not really yet. I'm ready to make an offer for a patrol officer now.
Oh, okay.
And also, depending on how fast we can move this, I have another person on a list that we created, a hiring list, that I'm not sure if they're available. I have to check, but obviously we can't do that right now. So the quicker for me, the better. I have a patrol officer that I'm ready to make an offer on now, and then I have another one who's a number 2 on our list that's possibly still available, and the other promotions are within. So it's kind of all ready to go.
Okay.
One of the things that we did discuss at the approving the budget was that before hiring anyone, we would have this money in hand and a 30-day period so we didn't get stuck in a
Right.
scenario where we didn't have that, where got hired and we don't have money.
Right.
So what, have we done, and I'll go to, one sec, Carl, have we done any research on the appeal process as far as how many signatures, timeline, and all that?
So if there were to be an appeal or
Referendum.
thank you.
Yeah.
Went blank there for a second. 30 days from the date that it is voted on.
The second reading.
So let's say we have the second reading on July 15th. Citizens would have until August 15th, or August 14th, I guess, to gather signatures. And it is 10% of the registered voters at the time that referendum takes place. I unfortunately did not have time to contact Clackamas County today to get I was
You're
gonna
talking
get the
about
total
500.
Yeah.
ish, somewhere in that ballpark. And again, that's a fluid number because it will, the county will look at on that specific day and time how many registered voters
Who
there are.
administers that? Is that gonna be Charity's responsibility if that ends up, or would they have to work through the county to do that? Do you know?
It's been
There's a whole referendum packet that I perused but did not get a chance to read all 17 pages in depth, but the general consensus that I took away from that, there is some administrative work that would need to be done, but the resident whoever starts that initiative has, hoops to jump through on there as well.
Similar to like when you run for office, I think you submit the signatures to the
Carry.
city,
Right.
and then the county verifies on the city's
Correct.
behalf, and it's probably
It's
similar.
just added on the Carriage.
Yeah.
And part of that process would also include, if a referendum starts to take place or that initial step starts to happen, we would then need to prepare a ballot title for if it was referred to a vote. We'd have to come up with a title.
Would we do
That-
that, or
that'd
would
be
they
on-
do that?
that'll be-
they're the
My
one-
understanding is that we would do it. They're
Yes.
saying they don't agree with the ordinance.
Yes.
But we would have to say, okay, it's going out to a vote now. Should it go to a vote? Are you comfortable or are you willing to,
So the
whatever
title
that
would be,
phrase
do
looks
you
like?
like public safety or not?
And then it goes to the lawyers, and the lawyers, of course, judge it, and appeals, yeah. So I know those processes, when the county's gone out for different things, how that got added back and forth with just the simplest of the word "the" in it.
Right.
Carl,
So
you-
there'll be some, communication with the VEH, and David's office about what that title looks like, should we get to that point.
I guess I'll finish up a little bit of this conversation, and I have another question on top of that. Is that how do we get this out to the people that we're doing this? Is this gonna be?
Yeah. Timing is,
Is
well,
everything?
yeah, right, so we do have a water utility bill that goes out, the deadline for us getting articles in that is like next week, so, there'll be some notification in the next bill, and that's assuming that the first reading, council proceeds, right, so, have kind of a, just production challenges there, but I think what we do is communicate that in the next bill, developing, put a web page out there with an FAQ and information about the fee and why it's needed and what this means and how often, what you're gonna pay,
Sure.
things like that. Happy to hear other ideas. Of course, we'll put it on social media.
I have a little concern because sometimes our media, I'm talking newspaper now, doesn't always get the message right, and we should probably.
It's not just ours.
Yeah, sit down with.
Yeah, I mean,
all
I'm agreeing
Brittany.
with newspapers not doing it right,
Yeah.
but we probably should make sure we get it right, because $4.50 is not that big a deal. I think we probably could swing it pretty easily, but you never know if it comes out. Somebody might see the $11 and.
That's why I was wondering about Mike, he left early, but we did a $3 one, or it was before I was even on council, but we did $3 stormwater. That was new and, slightly contentious, but I don't know what happened around that whole process. It
Right.
wasn't, it just appeared on the bill, how did they communicate?
So the public hearing is next week, so we're just assuming people are gonna look at our council meeting and be interested in viewing that, or do we advertise beyond that?
Yeah, we absolutely can. I mean, tonight the council, or next week, the council will be holding a public hearing on the proposed, public safety fee, and, put that on next door, put it on, the council meeting agenda, and put it out to Facebook, but.
I would like to say on it, now, there's always someone it's going to be new to, right? It's
Right.
always going to be new to somebody. That said, there's been 3 or 4 articles about it, right? It's been debated on social media. It's been I've written an editorial on that. And so I feel like, put it, so you hear all that, and then you put it in the next bill, an explanation of it, you do some of what Jordan just said. At a certain point, I think when you consider our resources and stuff, that's a pretty darn good faith effort,
Yeah,
to get the word out.
the level we're talking about is $4 and some
Right.
change. The survey we did here a few years back, go with the pool numbers, was something like $7 was where we lost our majority. So I think we shouldn't be too badly off for this particular time. The next round, there may be some more issues there. Which brings me to the other question I had is I'm calculating about 300 or so new houses a year added to the city. And that means that we've got another 460 times 12 added to that. How is that reflected in how much money we need for this new public safety? Because not that I'm worried about getting too much money, but I'm concerned about people's perceptions that we don't need the extra collections. Maybe we could use it for something else. What's your thinking about in those areas?
Well, development's interesting because they don't all come online at the same time. It's not like new fiscal year, you got 300 new homes right here that are gonna, go into
Happens all through
the
the
city's
year.
funds, right? And, there's a lot of development in the pipeline, but, it's not like 300 homes are built and constructed and
As you will know
600
from
new people.
things are proving.
Summer is
They're
usually the
moving in.
biggest time you get a bunch of the majority
Yeah.
of it, but.
And it's also, if you do the math, it's what, like $50-$60 or whatever it was, for a year. And, our conversations we've had is how often will we revisit this with the council, either through the budget process or the master fees and charges updates. I think growth will help tremendously, but we're funding 2 positions that will have, costs associated with labor contracts and cost of living adjustments
Sure,
and
they do.
PERS and things like that. So we actually do need the growth to keep up with funding those officers. We don't want to get in a position 2 years from now, we're saying, $4.50 can't support that patrol officer we hired, we got to increase the fee. And I'm not going to make a promise that we won't, by setting it by resolution, we could come back to the council, down the road and say, we need to bump it up, or we have a new need for another traffic officer or whatever. You have that flexibility in the future with this ordinance.
Well, that kind of leads into $4.60. I had like round numbers, like $5.
The intent behind
So-
that was to get as close to 520,000.
I understand that.
So just,
but
for clarification.
$5, it does give a cushion, but it's not 40 cents. I understand, every penny counts and keep it there, but kind of that round number. And do we want to have it coming back in a year from now or two? Anyway, I'm okay with the $4.60,
No,
but $5 is a round number, and we did $3 for the sewer, and it's just kind of an easier number to talk about.
40 cents maybe could pay for a new
It's not
speed trailer.
It's not gonna pay for much, right? But anyway,
Mark?
I was gonna go on that. That was my only thing I thought about this whole thing, looking at going, what's $5 or what's $12 or $11.
Some expect $4.60, in my mind, as torturous as that rationale may be, it sounds like it's been calculated. $5 could be something we just threw up in the air. Perception is an awful lot. I don't say it's everything anymore, but it's an awful lot. So I'm also with you. I don't know if we misguessed it by 40 cents a person, a house, and I'd rather be 40 cents too much than 40 cents not enough. And then have to make that addition somehow down the road, so.
Is there any amount of cushion in here for people that maybe don't pay their bill? I don't know how big of a number that could be.
It's small, so the
Okay.
city's current ordinance states that the utility bills stay with the residents. So even if someone doesn't pay their bill, we, in 99% of the cases, get that money at some point, whether it's when the property sells or it goes into foreclosure and the bank resells it.
That's true.
It's rare that we don't get those funds. Doesn't mean it doesn't take some time, especially when we have foreclosed properties that are, sitting vacant for a number of years, but we get our utility bill revenue at one point in time or another. But to add to your question, or to answer a question you didn't ask, but in that same vein, this does not take into account anyone that would have a potential hardship or any sort of program we may implement to help those that have a financial hardship, which would be a secondary conversation we need to have as far as how council wants to structure that, if at all.
Which we haven't done with the other.
Correct.
Okay.
The ordinance, the draft ordinance is attached for council's review. I think the only other thing that I would add is I did confirm with David Dupin's office that our typical noticing of the the June 17th meeting meets all the requirements. We don't have to do any advance notice for this type of ordinance. There's nothing, it's not like a land use thing where we need to notice in the paper and there's no special requirements, I guess, is my point. Not to say we wouldn't do, outreach and everything that Jordan
But
previously
legally
mentioned,
wouldn't.
but legally we don't have any special requirements that we need to complete.
And this draft ordinance, correct me if I'm wrong, was the same sort of model ordinance that we had, or previous administrations and councils looked at with the
Yes.
pool fee.
Correct, so this is the example that's been vetted by, our legal counsel. I went through and updated everything from a public services fee, which was brought before council last December, which included the pool and parks, and changed everything to just a public safety fee, and then sent that back for legal review. So it's been, read and vetted a number of times, and I think it's a pretty solid ordinance that minimizes our exposure.
Can you remind me what Gresham's pays
$15 bi-monthly,
bi-monthly, so $7.50
$7.50 a month.
for residents in businesses?
I don't know if they have a business charge. I only know from being a resident what, what I paid. And the last time I looked at their fee schedule, it did not denote, a difference. It just said, you know, they're.
And we're doing commercial industrial zoned things, not my wife's piano business or.
Right. Cause she does not, this would take the utility bill, so unless your wife, has a separate utility, a separate water meter for the, the piano room.
You know, they use a lot of water in that.
Piano.
There would not be, additional charges there.
Okay, I would just, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What's thoughts? Everyone's ready for this?
Yeah.
Yep.
So what was the thought on the price? Leave it the same as what it is? Change it to 5?
$4.60.
I'm thinking down the road, we're gonna end up with a recreation district add-on, and I'm sure we're gonna end up with a sewer plant add-on. And to some degree, I guess I'd wanna leave it as minimum possible, but that, I hate to even do this. On the other hand, if we made a mistake and we didn't calculate it right, that extra 40 cents would save our bacon. So I'm inclined to go to the 5. Sorry, but 5 is what I'll land on, okay?
Yeah, it's
Was
just-
that Carl?
It
Yeah, that was.
Lori, what do you think?
Carl, just 'cause, hey, just 'cause he's pulled that for whatever the reason, it's kind of hard to hear. Did I hear you right? You want to go with $5? Is that what you threw out?
Yeah, I went through a really certificates conversation. I'm way too informal tonight, so I'm gonna have to ask forgiveness that way. But yeah, there's pros and cons for me. It's not a big deal, $5. That way, if we do mess up and we didn't get the 40 cents worth of equipment, car, guns, Uzis, whatever it is that needs to be done, we can put it in there.
I think the chief would definitely welcome the funding for, you know, equipment, you know, firearm replacements and, you know, things like that, absolutely. You guys know the police department's budget pretty well by now and the situation they're in. This, you know, the amounts are really as a snapshot in time. It's like what exists right now today, you know, that could change in another month, you know, depending on, you know, new houses being sold, brought online, new customers and stuff too,
We
so.
haven't done negotiating with our union either, right?
Which we can't talk about it.
I know, but
So then, Carl, are you also suggesting that for the industrial, that go to like 11.50?
no, I had not suggested that.
About 12.
So,
Nice round number.
You know, I guess,
sorry, I didn't mean to throw a kink into things. It was just something I'd been thinking about.
no, I just, and I'd had conversations about this. My only worry about it, I just don't wanna put ourselves in a situation where we are underfunding, we are still dramatically underfunding the department.
Right.
Even after this fee, right? And so I just would, back to like when we just talked about rates at the very beginning of this meeting, I just, I don't wanna see us where we implement a $4.60 fee, and then it comes back and it's like, oh my goodness, you guys, like, or it should have been 8, or, you know.
Should have implemented it without hiring anybody to help fund the current
Or-
status of it, with the inflation that's happened.
But with those 22 cents a mile extra gas tax, per gallon,
Mhm.
that could add up to quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Tyler, are these numbers pretty, I know you say it's that's current estimate, and thank you for getting those, but are these the numbers as far as like single family units, multi-family units, are those pretty close? Do you think those are good ballpark?
Yeah, single family, it has not changed. I actually just
Okay.
pulled that number off of our most recent billing for, utilities. The multifamily, I've had some help from, our permit technician trying to pull together the actual number for that. It's gonna be a little bit higher than 700, but we still have some actual site visit door counting on
Sure,
some
sure,
residents
sure.
that we need to do. And then commercial industrial is an accurate number.
does it include the
Okay.
2 new
Thank
apartment
you.
complexes?
It includes the current water service, so, you know, if there's 5 buildings at the new residence, but only 2 of them have been rented out, it only has those 2, buildings that have.
I don't know if they've opened or not, I just know they're building them.
Sandy
But
Place
still-
is a-
Sandy Place,
But
I
remember,
think they have
people
2 of
move
them
in,
for.
calls are gonna grow, and
Yeah, I think what she's talking about was the money coming in.
Bethany, you had a question?
Yeah, and then I lost it. So close. Oh, do we not send, why can't we pull utility bills for multi-family residences too? Is it different?
So we don't have, yes,
Okay.
is the short answer. We have not, in utility billing, tracked the number of dwelling units at a multifamily residence in the past.
Oh,
The building and planning department did for a number of years previously, and a lot of that information is on like the initial pre-app and, building documents, but there's developments, or either pieces that we can't easily locate, or there's just, the one-off where we don't know what happened with, but.
Or as an example is where the house up in Cascadia, we rented there where we're building, and they get 1 water bill for the whole complex. As many lots there is, there's only 1 water bill, and yet then they turn around you and then bill you for water usage,
Oh,
not from
okay.
the city, but from there. That's one reason they don't, those
They don't have
residents
separate
don't get
meters.
water bill, they don't get water bill newsletters.
Right.
Oh,
The other, and this is a rare example, but I can't remember the name, there's a mobile home park on the other end of town that has, I think, 3 meters in their park, but 1 meter feeds like 5 units, 1 feeds 2, and then 1 feeds just 1 or some, so there's some detective work that we need to do, which essentially is just going and counting the number of doors or addresses on a building to get a more accurate number.
So how would you go about billing those? So you have 5 in one meter, 3 in the other, and 1, would you know that then that you're gonna calculate that you have 5 that truly is 1, 3, and 1?
So the utility billing software takes everything, takes your consumption times a rate times a dwelling unit, and currently the dwelling unit number in our software is just 1 across the board.
Correct.
So we would be updating in the software the number of dwelling units that are attached to that meter.
So I kinda guess where I'm at is, one is I think it's very important just implementing the fee, right? And that's probably maybe the most important part of what we do. Second is, we have a lot of things as far as revenue goes that we just don't know yet. You mentioned those, Carl, recreational district, wastewater. We also don't know how much outside resources, like, we're gonna be able to bring in for wastewater. I'm more of a plan, like, we're not going to get anything, and then be really happy when and if we do. So I would hate to have too large of a fee, not knowing, how much that, our utility fee in general is going to go up as we go down this wastewater deal. We can always revisit this fee after it's established, as we figure out where all where all our balls are landing. So I kinda like where we're at. I understand the $5 thing, but you kinda had me at hello, Carl, with your earlier point, which is,
Yeah.
We have an exact figure that we're trying to fill, and we're not asking our residents to pay any more or any less than that figure. And that way, if we have to go back to them, it's because, guess what? We need more, not just because we're, finding a number out of the air that we kinda, and I'm not trying to put that down. I think we should be talking about, these things.
Well, it depends either way, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
there's a marketing aspect to it as
Yeah.
well, like in the dollar amount.
Mhm.
And it goes back to when we we did a lot of studying around figuring out the Sandy net price and marketing aspects, and did lots of research of what that, how someone feels when they look at a number. By adding a 99 versus having it be the $4.
I was just gonna say, there's something to be said about 460 and not having a 5 in there for
Yeah,
Lord.
no, there is, and, it should be 462,
Mhm.
but, whatever.
Yeah.
Versus the odd number versus an even number, there is all the science to it, so, I don't know if science needs to be implemented into it, I just was throwing it out there as, you have some other ones, even Gresham did a 15 too, it's a round number. So same with, the other ones. I don't really,
Do a
I-
straw poll or something.
And then when you get raises in the future and that,
Paper
but
straw?
I don't think we're gonna get 300 houses next year. That would be great for funding coffers, but 300 houses coming
Two hundred
in.
and 70 last year and 300 and.
We just don't have enough billable lots,
Yeah,
that's
one-
why.
Maybe one counter argument against just a flat $5 fee is that, the other conversation, you'll have the resolution come back to you on July 15th when you adopt the ordinance. So the ordinance itself doesn't have a fee in it. The resolution, similar to how you pass, other fee adjustments, will be by resolution. And, if in the future, say you wanna tie this fee to CPI or do an increase, you're gonna lose that flat $5 at some point down the line probably, and it's gonna go to an odd number anyways. I know the initial sort of, how we communicate the fee, it sounds kinda nice, just, $5, whatever, but there is that psyche of $4.95 sounds better than 5, right,
And I also, I want to reiterate what John, I think, and I don't want to speak for him, I think what John Hamlin might say if he was here. But I never know these days, but what I would think he would mention is we're getting away from the budget committee a little bit. And,
Yeah.
and what, they had recommended was 2 additional officers. Now, we've already strayed a little way at the hiring date for those, right? But the recommendation, and we're part of that, but our budget committee recommendation was, we need 2 additional officers. Let's fill those positions outside of our current general fund, and we are meeting that. We are meeting that recommendation with this.
I think the $5 sounds derived and $4.60 looks more realistic.
I agree with that, Jan.
Yeah.
It does sound calculated, and
Yeah. It
that's.
sounds like it's intentional for an intentional purpose, but we said.
The only thing I was thinking of is that if we do miss it, we may have to come back, but then we're gonna have to come back anyway. I agree with you. Somebody's gonna have something that we just forgot, and somebody's gonna get another 50 cents.
It's important to keep in mind too, this will be on the existing utility bills, and so, I think people that do auto pay, people that, just write the check, how many people actually examine their utility bill, like, that's a new charge, right, because we're all responsible in municipal.
Because I wanna read that newsletter, make sure that it's on time,
Yeah,
right stuff.
Right, yeah.
If you put it on in the summertime, they'll just think they're using more water for
Right.
it.
That's
On the other hand, we do it during the winter time before my bill gets too big, and I water my grass.
So we all get on the public safety fee discussion?
Okay.
Yep.
I have one additional item. I want to take a quick straw poll. We have a meeting scheduled right now for August 19th, Monday. Is there any, is there flexibility on having another August date? Asking for a friend named Mackenzie.
Oh, that friend.
We do have the rest of the council to fill in for you.
City council president.
Right, but I think we're gonna be doing wastewater and stuff. Working toward
Do you think John won't be here, we won't have a quorum? 'Cause he doesn't-
Are you thinking the same week or a different
A
week?
different week
I don't,
or whatever.
I don't know.
Is there any August
I-
vacations planned or?
Is 19th this normal scheduled one?
Yes.
I'm gonna be gone on the 19th.
You are?
That's why I'm wondering.
So me too. So now, oh my God, we have quorum problems, guys. I think we're gonna have to do that.
Well, let's see what the 19th is.
If you go the week later, I have a permanent.
I am gone on the
meeting
19th, I will not be here on the 19th.
Oh, okay, so
Wow,
we actually
everyone's
do need
gone,
to
right?
reschedule.
What
it.
about the 12th?
I'm gonna be here, what do you mean on
Instead of having a
everybody?
work session that week?
Or if we just have it on the 12th. No, I don't think, are we meeting in July?
Yes, on the 15th. I would say the only thing about having back-to-back weeks, this is petty, but it's just the turnaround time. If we have back-to-back regular council meetings, and especially if we do a public hearing on the.
You have to announce.
Yeah, and it's especially if we try to do it right now, tentatively, we have a system facility plan for wastewater kind of lined up in August, so then having a 2-week break, if there's any things we hear from the public, in terms of making changes to that plan or incorporate or comments from council, giving us enough time to make that change.
Well-
But, you know, right now, we also have Labor Day for our first meeting in September. We can look at another day that week too.
Well, normally that would be the 6th and the Tuesday,
Yeah.
the next day. So then you're having what, yeah. I don't think the 12th, that's less than a week, maybe to the 12th, or exactly 1 week.
Would it be easier to go a day instead of a week? Go to Tuesday instead of?
Well, I'll be still, I'll be
Yeah,
kidding.
other people will be on
You guys
vacation.
are out a whole
Full
week.
week.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
I don't have
So
kids anymore.
it's the only
so
week
really
that
not
works
looking-
for us to take a week.
Well, maybe what we do is we can,
Well-
poll the council and get
Well,
your
we're gonna go
vacation
on to-
schedules and
Do it-
find
do a
another day.
doable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
Just ask
uncommon
them.
for us to only have one, meeting,
Yeah.
especially in July, and even in August, we've done it too, we just, what's really dictated is what has to be voted on,
Mhm.
time-wise, if there's a planning or something, that there's a 90-day clock ticking. We've had emergency meetings where we came in here for literally 10 minutes to vote on something and then go. Because of the ticking clock, but
Yeah. I'm trying to
usually we
think
don't
right
have.
Doodle pull it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll find another day.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're having some wastewater that we want.
I wanna
as
go-
many
I'm not
people-
calling in
You
before
wanna
we
wait?
talk
Go
about
to
that,
wait for
just so
it.
you know.
We were just
Right now, it's
looking for-
annexation.